hello. And thank you for allowing this moment for yourself. You can let go of all focus now. Just allow your attention to soften, as my voice gently carries you to a place of rest. A place where we find the story of a hunger so deep, it could lead a person to do the unthinkable. A story about a job that no one would ever want, but that someone, in the end, always had to do. Before we drift too far, if you feel a connection to this place, you're welcome to leave a quiet, like or subscribe. Think of it not as a task, but as leaving a soft footprint in the sand before you continue your journey inward. And if you feel so inclined, you can let me know in the comments what city you're listening from, and what time it is for you. It's a nice way to feel a quiet connection, knowing we are all listening together under different skies. Alright, let the shadows in your room grow long and soft. Maybe you can hear the faint sound of your own breathing, and together, let's allow the story to begin. The first thing you are aware of is the hunger. It isn't the polite, distant hunger of a missed meal. This is a physical presence. It's a cold, hard knot in the pit of your stomach, a creature with teeth that gnaws at you from the inside out. It's been your constant companion for so long now, you can't remember a time without it. It wakes with you in the damp straw of your hovel, and it's the last thing you feel before slipping into a thin, fitful sleep. You are on the outside of everything. Your world is defined by a line you cannot cross. Over there, just across the muddy track, is the village. You can see the cozy, buttery glow of candlelight in the windows of the cottages. You can smell the wood smoke from their chimneys, a scent that promises warmth and, more importantly, cooking. Sometimes on a clear night, you can even hear the distant murmur of voices from the tavern. Maybe a burst of laughter that feels like it's from another world entirely, because that is the world of people. And you are something else. You live in the space between the village and the wild woods, in a lean minester made of scavenged timber and packed earth that does a poor job of keeping the persistent English drizzle at bay. You are an outcast. Maybe you were born to it, or maybe you committed some small crime that has been magnified by gossip into a monstrous transgression. The reason doesn't matter anymore. The result is the same. You are untouchable, invisible when you beg, and all too visible when you get too close. This is a fundamental reality of life in these times, a point of mainstream history that is often smoothed over. For every tight-knit community, there was always a fringe, a collection of the destitute, the unlucky, and the shunned, who existed in a permanent state of precariances. You are one of them. Your survival depends on the scraps the villagers might leave out scraps they wouldn't even give to their dogs, or what you can forage from the woods when you have the strength. Today, the hunger is worse than usual. It makes you dizzy. You sit at the entrance of your crude shelter, watching the grey sky weep, feeling the damp cold seep into your bones. It's a terrible kind of quiet. And then, through the rain, you see another figure approaching. Not from the village. From further down the outcast path. It's an old woman, her face a roadmap of hardship, who sometimes shares a bit of gossip for a stale crust, if you have one. She has nothing for you today. Only words. She hunches down beside you, her voice a dry whisper that barely carries over the rain. Old man Hemlock is gone, she rasps. Passed in his sleep this morning. You just nod. It means nothing to you. One less person to scowl at you if you get too close to the market. But she isn't finished. She leans closer, her eyes darting towards the village lights. They're looking for someone, she continues, her voice dropping even lower. His family. They're traditionalists. The old way is the only way for them. You know what she means. Everyone on the fringe knows. It's a story whispered in hushed tones, a folk practice that exists in the shadows of the church's sermons. A grim and terrifying opportunity that only ever presents itself to the truly desperate. It was based on a very peculiar and, to us, a very strange belief. A little minus known piece of folklore, really. The idea was that when a person died, their sins didn't just vanish, they lingered. They were a kind of spiritual residue, a sticky substance that clung to the soul, preventing it from passing peacefully into the afterlife. The church offered prayers and last rites, of course. But for some in the deep countryside, that wasn't enough. They needed a more direct method. And that's where the whispers lead, to a ritual. A meal. A person. Historians still argue about where this strange custom even came from. Some believe it's a distorted remnant of an ancient, pre-Christian pagan rite, a piece of old magic that refused to die. Others suggest it was a practical invention of the common folk, born from a deep seated fear of damnation and a lack of faith in the official channels. A sort of spiritual loophole for the terrified. The debate remains unsettled, lost to the unrecorded history of the poor. The old woman looks at you, her gaze sharp and knowing. She sees the hollows in your cheeks, the desperation in your eyes. A whole loaf of bread, she whispers, the words hanging in the air like a spell. And a tankard of ale, a good one, and a coin, a silver groat, a whole loaf. The thought is so overwhelming it makes your head swim. A silver coin, enough to buy food for a week, maybe more. It's a fortune. It's a fantasy. But you know the price. The price is not the act of eating. The price is what you would be eating. You would not just be consuming bread and ale. You would be consuming every lie old man Hemlock ever told. Every moment of greed. Every act of cruelty. Every dark thought. You would be taking all it into yourself, pulling his sins from his soul into yours, leaving him clean for his journey to heaven, and leaving you, what, doubly damned. The old woman gets up, her joints cracking. Just thought you should know, she says, before shuffling off into the gloom. You are left alone again, with only the rain and the gnawing in your belly. But now, there is also a thought, a terrible, tempting, horrifying thought. A loaf of bread. A coin. All you have to do is eat a dead man's life of sin. And as the hunger claws at your insides, you find yourself listening, waiting for a knock that you both dreaded. Just maybe, desperately hopeful. The rain has softened to a fine mist, hanging in the air like a shroud, and the world has fallen into a deeper, darker shade of grey. You've retreated into your hovel, curled into a tight ball for warmth, trying to ignore the gnawing emptiness inside you. The old woman's words have taken root in your mind, a seed of an idea that is both monstrous and beautiful. You try to push it away, to think of anything else, the ache in your back, the drip of water from the makeshift roof, but the image of a whole loaf of bread keeps returning, phantom-like, almost luminous in the darkness of your thoughts. You tell yourself it's just a story, a bogeyman tale to scare children and the desperate. Nobody actually does that anymore. It's a relic of a darker time. The village priest would have a fit, you think. He preaches of confession and penance, of God's grace and the church's power to absolve. This other thing, this is something else entirely. Something old and earthy and deeply unofficial. And then you hear it. A sound that doesn't belong in your world. Not the scuttling of a rat or the sigh of the wind. It's the snap of a twig, followed by the squelch of a heavy boot in the mud, just outside your shelter. Your heart gives a painful lurch. No one from the village ever comes this way, not at night. To them, this patch of wasteland is haunted, a place of ill-minus omen and ill-minus repute, home only to you. You hold your breath, trying to become smaller, to melt into the shadows. Perhaps it's the landowner's steward, come to kick you off this miserable patch of earth. Or worse, a group of drunken youths from the tavern, looking for some cruel sport. But there is only one set of footsteps. They stop right outside the ragged flap of hide that serves as your door. For a long moment there is only silence, broken by the steady drip, 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 drip of water. You can feel a presence there. A human shape in the darkness, hesitating. You imagine them standing there, breathing in the damp, musty smell of your poverty, gathering their courage. Then comes the knock. It's not a knock really, more of a soft, hesitant rap on the damp wood of your shelter's frame. It's the sound of someone who does not want to be here, someone who is forcing themselves to perform an unpleasant task. Slowly, painfully you uncurl your stiff limbs. Every instinct screams at you to stay quiet, to pretend you are not here, that you are nothing but another pile of rags in the corner. But the hunger is a master that demands obedience. And so you crawl towards the entrance. You pull back the flap of hide just a crack. A man stands there, silhouetted against the faint, dying light. She is dressed in dark, respectable wool. Not the rags of the outcast, but not the finery of the gentry either. A farmer, a craftsman, a villager. He holds a lantern, but the light is turned low, casting his face in a flickering dance of shadow and anxiety. You can see his jaw is clenched tight. Are you the one, he asks. His voice is a low rumble, rough with a tension he is trying to control. He doesn't say your name. You realize with a pang that he probably doesn't even know it. You are not a person to him. You are a function. A tool for a grim purpose. You don't answer. You just look at him, your eyes adjusting to the lantern light. You can see now that his own eyes are red-rimmed, his face etched with fresh grief. This is a man in mourning. This is the son or the brother or the nephew of Old Man Hemlock. He seems to take your silence as confirmation. He clears his throat, a dry, rasping sound. My father, he begins, then stops. He swallows hard. He has passed on. He was a hard man. He had a long life, many accounts to settle. HES not talking to you, not really. HES justifying this to himself, to the night, to the ghost of his father. He reaches into a leather pouch at his belt and pulls something out. He holds it up in the lantern light. A loaf of bread. It's not large, but it's beautifully round with a dark flour-dusted crust. To your starving eyes, it is the most exquisite thing you have ever seen. You can almost feel the weight of it grain. Your stomach gives a violent, painful cramp. And this, he says, his other hand coming forward. It holds a small pewter tankard, filled to the brim with dark ale. Foam glistens on the rim. Beside the bread and ale, a single coin glints in the light. A silver groat. It seems to burn with a cold fire. For the service, he says, his voice dropping to a whisper. To ease his passage, to take it on, you know. The unspoken words hang in the air between you, to take his sins upon your soul. This is a moment that history rarely records. The official documents, birth records, death certificates, tax ledgers, they tell one story, but the unwritten history of folklore and oral custom tells another. The act of sin minus eating was a transaction born of utter desperation on both sides. The family, gripped by a profound, terrifying fear of eternal damnation for their loved one, were desperate enough to resort to a forbidden, semi-minus pagan ritual, were desperate enough from hunger to even consider it. Historians often call this a folk religion, a set of beliefs that operated parallel to, and sometimes in defiance of, the official church. There's a curious detail some old accounts mention. A piece of cold knowledge for you. The sin-minus eater was often required to be a stranger, or at least not a friend of the family. The belief was that someone with an emotional connection to the deceased might not be able to perform the ritual properly. Their grief might interfere with the spiritual transfer. You had to be a pure vessel, an empty container for the sins. Your status as an outcast, ironically, made you the perfect candidate. The man shows the items towards you, an offering made across the threshold of two worlds. The lantern light catches the desperation in his eyes. He is not a cruel man, you sense. He is a frightened one. Frightened for his father's soul. Frightened of you. Frightened of what he is doing right now, in the dead of night, on the edge of the woods. Will you do it? He presses, his voice cracking, for him. You look from his face to the bread. The beautiful, perfect bread. You think of the gnawing pain in your stomach. You think of waking up tomorrow with that same pain, only worse. You think of a life of slow, grinding starvation. Then you look back at the man's face. You see his fear, his grief. He is offering you a meal to save his father's soul, and a coin to damn your own. Slowly, deliberately, you reach out a trembling, dirt-stained hand, not for the coin, not for the bread, and in that moment, the silent agreement is made. Your new life, or perhaps your new damnation, is about to begin. Your fingers, numb with cold and trembling slightly, close around the rough, fiery crust of the bread. It's real, the weight of it is real. For a moment you just hold it, this impossible object, feeling the solid promise of sustenance in your palm. The man lets out a breath he seems to have been holding since he arrived, a sound of profound, weary relief. "Come," he says, his voice still low and urgent. "It must be done before the dawn." While he is still with us, he turns without waiting for a reply, holding the lantern high. He clearly expects you to follow. You hesitate for only a second, clutching the loaf to your chest like a holy relic, the tankard of ale cradled carefully in your other arm. You pull the ragged hood of your cloak over your head, not for warmth, but from a deep, instinctual need to hide your face. Then you step out of your hovel and into the mud and mist, following the small, dancing circle of light. The path to the village is a path you know, yet it feels entirely different tonight. You are not skulking along the edges, hoping to go unnoticed. You are being led, an uninvited guest on the most dreadful of errands. The man walks a few paces ahead of you, his back stiff. He doesn't speak. The silence is thick, broken only by the sound of your own ragged breathing and the squelch of your worn shoes in the wet earth. As you draw closer, the village changes. It's no longer a distant collection of warm, inviting lights. Up close you see that the cottages are dark, their windows like vacant eyes. The doors are shut tight. The cheerful wood smoke you smelled from a distance now seems thin and ghostly in the damp air. The entire village seems to be holding its breath. They know, of course they know. News of a death travels fast, but news of a sin-minor summons travels faster, on whispers of fear and morbid curiosity. You can feel their presence behind the dark windows and bolted doors. You can feel their eyes on you, even though you can't see them. You are walking through a gauntlet of unseen watchers. To them, you are unnecessary evil, a creature of the night called forth to perform a dark but essential magic. You are both essential magic. You are both their salvation and their scapegoat. You can feel the weight of their judgment settling on your shoulders, pressure as real as the dampness of your cloak. They need you. They need the service for their own peace of mind, to believe that their loved ones, their neighbors, their friends, can be scrubbed clean before meeting their maker. But for the ritual to work in their minds, they also need to despise you. This is a core psychological component of the whole affair. For the sins to be truly transferred, they have to go somewhere. And that somewhere is you. You become the vessel, the living repository of the community's transgressions. By hating you, by fearing you, by casting you out, they reinforce the reality of the transfer. They are not just shunning a poor outcast, they are shunning the sins of Old Man Hemlock, which you now carry. One of the strangest details historians have uncovered relates to the path you are walking right now. In some parts of Wales, it was believed that the sin-minor had to approach the house of the deceased by a specific, winding route, often avoiding crossroads, which were thought to be places of powerful supernatural energy. The journey itself was part of the ritual, a symbolic spiraling inward toward the dead. It's a tiny detail, but it speaks to how deeply these beliefs were woven into the very landscape. You keep your eyes fixed on the muddy ground in front of you, on the heels of the man leading you. You focus on the loaf of bread in your hands. The smell is intoxicating, a rich, yeasty perfume that makes the hunger in your belly roar. It's a cruel irony. You are carrying the most desirable object in your world, but you are not allowed to eat it. Not yet. It is not yet food. It is just bread. It is just bread. It must first be consecrated in its own dark way. You pass the village church, a hulking stone shadow against the charcoal sky. The sight of its ends a strange chill through you. What you are about to do is a direct circumvention of everything that building stands for. The priest offers salvation through God. You are about to offer it through a piece of bread and a swallow of ale. It is a quiet, desperate heresy performed out of sight of the cross. There is still debate among scholars about the Church's true stance on sin-minor eating. Officially, of course, it was condemned as a blasphemous, pagan superstition. Priests and bishops wrote sermons against it. Yet, on the local level, in isolated rural parishes, the lines were often blurred. A village priest might look the other way, understanding that the faith of his flock was a complex tapestry of official doctrine and ancient folklore. He might condemn it from the pulpit on Sunday, while tacitly allowing it to happen on a Tuesday night, recognizing a spiritual need that his own rituals couldn't quite satisfy. Finally, the man stops. He has led you to a small, neat cottage, no different from the others, except for one thing. A single candle burns in the front window, a lonely beacon in the oppressive dark. This was a common custom, the death light, meant to guide the spirit of the deceased on its journey and to ward off any malevolent forces that might be drawn to a house of mourning. The man turns to you. His face in the lantern light is pale, slick with a nervous sweat despite the cold. "Wait here," he commands, his voice a strained whisper. He places the lantern on the ground, and for a moment you are plunged back into near-minus darkness. He slips through the cottage door, which closes behind him with a soft click, and you are left alone on the doorstep, standing in the mud in the dark, holding your cursed payment. You can hear the faint, muffled sound of weeping from inside the cottage. You are at the edge of a family's deepest grief, and you are about to step across the threshold, not as a comforter, but as a human sponge, ready to absorb the filth of a life you never knew. The cottage door creaks open again, spilling a thin, wavering slice of candlelight into the gloom. The man beckons you forward with a quick, nervous gesture. As you step over the threshold, a wave of unfamiliar air washes over you. It's thick with the smells of grief, the cloying scent of medicinal herbs, the musty odor of old linen, and something else, a faint, sweetish undertone, that is the smell of death itself. The inside of the cottage is a single, low-minus silent room crowded with the simple, hand-minus carved furniture of a lifetime. A fire smolders in the hearth, casting long, dancing shadows that make the small space feel alive with movement. In the center of the room, laid out on a long wooden table that has been scrubbed clean, is the body. It is covered by a simple white shroud, a thin linen sheet that conceals the face and form, but cannot hide the stark, unmoving reality of what lies beneath. At the head of the table sits a woman, her face buried in her hands. Her shoulders shake with silent sobs. At the foot, a younger woman, perhaps a daughter, stands rigid, her face pale and tear-minus streaked, her knuckles white as she clutches a small wooden crucifix. They are the mourners, and they do not look at you, a necessary presence they have collectively agreed to ignore. The man who leads you here, the son, you now assume gestures towards the table. His movements are stiff and awkward, like a man performing a play whose lines he has not quite memorized. "Place it on his chest," he says, his voice barely audible over the crackle of the fire. You approach the body. The air grows colder the closer you get. This is the heart of the ritual, the fulcrum upon which everything turns. You look down at the shrouded form. This is Old Man Hemlock, a man you might have seen 100 times in the village market, a face in the crowd, but whom you never knew. And yet, in a few moments, you will know him more intimately than his own family. You will taste the very essence of his soul. With reverent slowness, you place the loaf of bread directly over the center of the corpse's chest, where the heart would be. The simple domestic object looks profoundly out of place there, a symbol of life resting on a vessel of death. Then you set the tankard of ale beside it. The son nods, a small, jerky movement. Now he must perform his part of the ritual. He steps forward and places his hands on either side of the loaf, not quite touching it. He closes his eyes. "With this bread I give thee my father's sins," he begins, his voice trembling as he recites the old words. Every falsehood spoken, every promise broken, every act of greed, every seed of envy. His voice is a low, monotonous chant. With each category of sin he names, you can feel the atmosphere in the room growing heavier, more charged. The women have stopped crying. There is only the man's litany of transgression and the hiss of the fire. "With this ale I give thee his anger, his pride, and his despair," he continues, his hands now hovering over the tankard. "All the bitterness he held, all the kindness he withheld, let it be drawn from his soul, and let it pass into this meal." This part of the ceremony is something historians call transference, a concept common in folk magic all over the world. The idea that an immaterial quality like a sin or an illness or even good luck could be magically passed into a physical object. The object then becomes a kind of sponge or a magnet. In this case, the bread and ale are being transformed from mere food into a spiritual container. They are being charged like a battery with the negative energy of a human life. One particularly odd historical account, a footnote in a forgotten Victorian ethnographer's journal, describes a variation of this ritual. In it, a pinch of salt was also placed on the corpse's chest, sometimes in a small dish. Salt, being a symbol of purity and preservation, was thought to act as a kind of catalyst, helping to draw the sins out more effectively before they were absorbed by the bread. It was a piece of arcane chemistry, a recipe for the soul. The fact that salt was also a valuable commodity adds another layer to the transaction. The son finishes his recitation. He opens his eyes, which are now filled with a strange mixture of fear and hope. He looks at you, truly looks at you, for the first time. "It is ready," he whispers. The room is utterly silent. The two women are watching you now, their gazes intense, unwavering. This is the moment they have been waiting for, the moment of absolution. You reach out, your hands seeming to move with incredible slowness through the thick, heavy air. You pick up the loaf of bread. It feels different now. Heavier, not in a physical sense, but in some other way you can't define. It is no longer just a loaf of bread. It is a life of petty cruelties, of quiet regrets, of moments of shame and selfishness. It is the accumulated weight of one man's journey through the world. You look at the ale, dark and still in its pewter tankard. It seems to have absorbed the shadows of the room, holding them within its depths. That is his rage, his sorrow, his pride. For your entire life you have been defined by hunger, by emptiness, by a lack of everything. Now, you are about to be filled, not with food, but with the spiritual refuse of another man's existence. You are the final, grim accountant for a soul that has already departed, tasked with clearing its debts. The family watches, their breath held. The shadows dance. The fire pops. You raise the bread to your lips. The time has come for your first cursed meal. You lift the bread. The yeasty smell fills your nostrils, a scent so wholesome and good it feels like a lie. Your stomach clenches with a fierce, primal need. Your body, starved for so long, is screaming at you to devour it, to tear into the crust and gorge yourself on the soft interior. But your mind, gripped by the chilling solemnity of the moment, holds you back. This is not for satisfying hunger. This is an act of spiritual alchemy. Your gaze meets the sun's. His eyes are wide, pleading. Do it, they say. Set him free. The women are statues of grief, their entire beings focused on you on this single pivotal act. You are the center of their universe right now, a wretched outcast elevated to the role of adult priest in this desperate, domestic ceremony. You take a bite. The crust is hard and cracks loudly in the silent room. The bread inside is dense and chewy. Your saliva glands flood your mouth, a purely physical reaction to the presence of food. But you can't taste it. The simple pleasure of eating is completely absent. It's like chewing on ash, on dust, on nothingness. All your senses are consumed by a different kind of ingestion. As you chew and swallow, a strange feeling begins to creep over you. It's not a physical sensation, but something deeper, more invasive. A wave of profound, bone-minus deep weariness washes through you, a fatigue that has nothing to do with your own body. It's accompanied by a flicker of something, a memory that isn't yours. For a fleeting instant, you see a flash of sunlight on a field of barley, feel a surge of pride that is not your pride. It vanishes as quickly as it came, leaving you disoriented. You take another bite. This time, a different feeling. A hot, prickling shame. A memory of a cruel word spoken to a child, a small act of dishonesty in the marketplace. It's not a vision, not a clear picture, but a pure, unadulterated emotion that floods your being and then recedes, leaving a bitter residue. You are not just eating bread, you are consuming experiences. This is the very heart of the sin-eater myth, the part that transforms it from a simple folk custom into something deeply psychological and terrifying. Mainstream history will tell you about funeral rites and religious practices, but it rarely touches on the internal, subjective experience of the participants in these fringe rituals. The belief wasn't just that a magical transfer occurred, but that the sin-eater felt it. They were thought to literally take on the spiritual and emotional burdens of the deceased. You continue to eat, bite by mechanical bite. Each swallow is a new wave of alien emotion. A flash of stubborn, pointless anger over a property line dispute, a pang of regret for a kindness not offered, a moment of small, secret vanity. It's a torrent of mundane, human failings, the everyday sins that make up a life. It's not the grand, dramatic evil the priests preach against. It's the quiet, persistent grit of an ordinary, imperfect soul, and it is overwhelming. You feel your own identity, your own meager collection of sorrows and pains, being submerged under the weight of this other man's life. Old Man Hemlock, you are getting to know him now from the inside out. After you have forced down the last of the dry, tasteless bread, you pick up the tankard of ale. It is cool to the touch. You raise it to your lips and drink. The ale is flat and bitter on your tongue. As you swallow the dark liquid, a final, powerful wave of feeling crashes over you. It is not an emotion, but the absence of one. A vast, hollow emptiness. A deep, chilling loneliness. A deep, chilling loneliness. The final feeling of a man facing his own end. You set the empty tankard down on the table. The sound it makes is unnaturally loud in the still room. It is done. The effect on the family is immediate and profound. The son lets out a shuddering gasp, as if a great weight has been lifted from his own shoulders. The woman who had been sobbing at the head of the table raises her face. The tears are still there, but the anguish in her eyes has been replaced by a kind of exhausted peace. The younger woman at the foot of the table lowers her crucifix, her tense posture softening. You have done what they asked. You have taken the darkness into yourself so that they can have the light. You have cleaned the slate for Old Man Hemlock. His soul, they believe, is now free, unburdened, ready to ascend. And your soul? Well, that is your problem. A little minus known but fascinating aspect of this custom is what was supposed to happen immediately after. The transaction wasn't complete until the sin-seater had vacated the premises. The vessel, now filled with sin, was considered spiritually toxic. Its presence was a contamination. Any moment spent in your company now was a moment of grave spiritual peril for the family. The son, his duty to his father now fulfilled, seems to remember this. His face, which had softened in relief, now hardens again. The brief connection between you, the shared intimacy of the ritual, is severed. You are no longer the priest. You are the pariah. You are a walking, breathing container of filth. He looks at you with a new expression in his eyes, not gratitude, not pity, but fear. A deep, primal fear. Fear of what you now are. Fear of what you now are. Fear of what you now carry inside you. Go, he says, his voice flattened cold. Now, he points to the door. The message is clear. The service is rendered. The contract is complete. Get out of their sight. You don't need to be told twice. A powerful, instinctual urge to flee is already coursing through you. The cottage, which moments ago felt like a solemn, sacred space, now feels suffocating hostile. The air is thick with a silent, urgent command to leave. You turn your back on the family, on the empty tankard, on the shrouded body of the man whose life now churns inside you. As you reach the door, the son's voice stops you. Wait. You pause, your hand on the rough wooden latch. But you do not turn around. You hear him fumbling with the pouch at his belt. Then you hear the sharp, metallic clink of a coin landing on the floorboards just behind you. Your payment, he says, his voice devoid of any warmth. The coin. The silver groat. The final piece of the transaction. You glance down. It lies there in the dirt and straw scattered on the floor, gleaming dully in the firelight. It looks small and worn, utterly insignificant compared to the immense, invisible burden that has just been placed upon your soul. You bend down, your joints protesting, and pick it up. The metal is cold against your skin, a stark contrast to the strange, feverish turmoil within you. It feels impossibly heavy in your palm, its weight measured not in ounces, but in the gravity of the sins it has just purchased. This single coin represents your absolution of another man's life. It is the price of a soul, or rather, the rental fee for your own. This moment, the payment, is a crucial detail that historians find fascinating. It solidifies the act not as a form of charity or religious rite, but as a professional transaction. This distinction is important because it separates the sin-eater from, say, a monk who prays for the dead out of piety. You are not a holy man. You are a service provider. And this cold, hard coin is your wage. It makes the entire affair more sordid, more desperate, and somehow more human. You straighten up, the coin clutched in your fist. You don't say thank you. The word would be absurd. He has not given you a gift. He has paid a debt. And you have taken on a debt of a different, more terrifying kind. Without another look back, you pull open the door and slip out into the night. The damp, cold air is a shock, but a welcome one. It feels clean, pure after the spiritually dense atmosphere of the cottage. The door clicks shut behind you, a sound of absolute finality. You are once again on the outside, but your status has changed. Before, you were an outcast, an object of pity and mild contempt. Now, you are something far worse. You are a creature of dread, a vessel of sin. You begin to walk, not towards your hovel, but away from the village, instinctively seeking the deepest shadows. Your steps are unsteady. Your mind is a whirlwind of confusion and borrowed feelings. The weariness of old man Hemlock's final hours settles into your bones. The phantom shame for his petty thefts makes your own face feel hot. You are a walking ghost story, haunted from the inside. As you stumble through the darkness, you hear a sound. A window shutter being thrown open. Then a voice, sharp with fear and hatred, cuts through the night. Begone, sin minus eater. Take your filth with you. Then another voice from another cottage. Don't look at him. He'll curse you with a glance. Suddenly, the village that was holding its breath is exhaling a collective torrent of fear and loathing. Doors are unbolted not to welcome, but to shout abuse. The unseen watchers have found their voice. They are chasing you away, not with sticks and stones, but with words, with the sheer force of their revulsion. They are completing the ritual. The final act is the casting out, the purification of the community by expelling the sin you now contain. This is a classic anthropological pattern known as scapegoating. A community projects its own fears, anxieties, and sins onto a single individual or group, who is then punished or exiled, symbolically cleansing the whole. You are the perfect scapegoat. You have literally, in their eyes, consumed the community's moral dirt. Now you must be driven out for the cleansing to be complete. You break into a clumsy run, stumbling over the uneven ground, the hateful words like whips at your back. You don't look back. You just run, away from the lights, away from the voices, clutching the single, heavy coin in your hand. You finally collapse at the edge of the woods, your lungs burning, your heart hammering against your ribs. The village is behind you, a smudge of distant, hostile light. The voices have faded. There is only the sound of your own ragged breath and the sighing of the wind in the trees. You open your fist and look at the coin again. A silver groat. In the faint moonlight, it looks like a dead man's eye, staring up at you. It is enough money to buy food for a week, maybe 2. It is the key to surviving, physically. But as you sit there, trembling in the cold, a terrifying thought occurs to you. You have eaten. You have been paid. But you have never felt so empty or so full of dread. The coin is cold in your hand, a chilling promise of your future. There will be other deaths. There will be other grieving families. There will be more bread, more ale, more coins. This is your life now. This is the lonely, terrifying path you have just stepped onto. The first light of dawn finds you not in your hovel, but huddled deep in the woods, as far from the village as your exhausted legs could carry you. The grey light filters weakly through the dense canopy of oak and yew, painting the world in pale, washed minus out colors. You slept, but it was not sleep. It was a chaotic tumble of dreams filled with faces you didn't know and feelings that weren't yours. You dreamt of a market day from 50 years ago, the taste of a stolen apple, the sting of a father's slap. You woke up with the phantom ache of old man Hemlock's arthritic joints in your own hands. Your stomach is no longer gnawing with hunger. The bread and ale sit inside you like a stone, a heavy, indigestible lump. You feel bloated, not with food, but with the spiritual weight of what you consumed. The hunger is gone, but in its place is a profound and unsettling fullness. You know you cannot go back, not to your old shelter, It's too close to the village, too exposed. Last night, they cast you out with words. The next time, it might be with stones. Your very presence is now a blight, a reminder of death and sin that they cannot tolerate. You have served your purpose, and now you must vanish. So you walk. You clutch the single silver coin in a small leather pouch you keep tied around your neck, the only thing of value you possess. It feels less like a payment and more like a brand. You trudge deeper into the wilderness, following deer trails and the whisper of running water, putting distance between yourself and the life you once knew. For days you live off the land, foraging for berries and roots, drinking from streams. You are reverting to something wild, something untethered from the world of people. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, you stumble upon it. A ruin. It might have been a shepherd's hut once, or a forester's cottage, abandoned long ago. Now it's just a tumble of stones and rotting timber, half-minus swallowed by ivy and moss, set in a gloomy, forgotten clearing. The roof has mostly collapsed, but one corner remains, offering a semblance of shelter from the rain. It is a grim, desolate place. And it is perfect. It is far enough from any village that you won't be seen. It's defensible in its own miserable way. Most importantly, it feels right. It is a place for the damned, a shelter for the haunted. It matches the landscape of your own soul. This will be your new home. Not a place to live, but a place to exist, a place to hide. The lives of outcasts like the Sin Minor Sita are almost entirely absent from the official historical record. They didn't own land, pay taxes, or have their births and deaths recorded in the parish register. Our knowledge of them comes from scraps folklore, court records describing their banishment, and the occasional horrified account from a traveling gentleman or cleric. Their homes were, by necessity, invisible. They lived in caves, abandoned structures, or crude shelters in the waste, the common lands that no one else wanted. Your choice of this room is a historically accurate reflection of a life lived entirely on the margins. You spend the next weeks making the ruin habitable, a word that feels like a gross overstatement. You clear the rubble from the once intact corner. You patch the roof with branches and mud and sod. You build a crude fire pit. Your days are filled with the hard, mindless labor of survival, and you are grateful for it. It keeps the thoughts at bay. It keeps the void memories from overwhelming you. But at night, when the fire burns low and the only sound is the hooting of an owl, they return. The feelings. The flashes of a life that wasn't yours. You feel a sudden, sharp pang of grief for a wife whose face you've never seen. You feel a surge of bitter resentment towards a neighbor over a forgotten dispute. You are haunted, not by a ghost, but by the emotional residue of a ghost. One of the more peculiar and debated aspects of sin minor seating is the idea of accumulation. Did the sins of one person get overwritten by the next, or did they stack up? Most folkloric interpretations lean towards the latter, the more terrifying option. The sin minor seater's soul was seen as a kind of ledger, with each ritual adding a new, indelible entry. You didn't just become the vessel for one man's sins, you became a library of them. This creates a chilling psychological question. What happens to a person who is constantly absorbing the negative emotions and experiences of others? Today, we might call it a form of extreme, second-hand trauma. For you, it's just a terrifying reality. You start to lose track of where your own feelings end and old man hemlocks begin. Was that your own flash of anger, or his? Is this sadness yours, or is it a memory of his? You live in this state of profound isolation and internal confusion. The silver groat in your pouch is a constant, nagging reminder. It is your only link to the human world, and it represents the very act that severed you from it. You know you will have to use it eventually, but the thought of going to a market, of trying to interact with people, fills you with a paralyzing dread. What will they see when they look at you? A beggar, an outcast. Or will they somehow sense what you are, what you carry? Will they see the shadow of a dead man's soul lurking behind your eyes? For now the coin stays in its pouch, a cold weight against your chest, and you stay in your ruin, a ghost haunting the edges of the world. Weeks bleed into a month. The raw shock of your first ritual begins to dull into a constant, low-grade ache, a permanent shadow in the back of your mind. Survival forces a routine upon you. You learn the rhythms of the forest, the places to find edible mushrooms, the way a rabbit path looks in the morning dew. You are becoming a creature of this lonely landscape. But you are still human, and your isolation is a heavy cloak. The time comes when the silver groat in your pouch can no longer be ignored. Your scavenged flint has worn to a nub, and your ragged clothes offer little protection against the creeping autumn chill. You need things that only the world of people can provide. And so, one misty morning, you prepare for a journey. You know you cannot simply walk into a village looking as you do. You are not just a poor traveler, you are a marked man. At least in your own mind, you feel as if your new, dreadful occupation is written on your face. So you decide you need a disguise. Not a clever one, but a costume. A uniform that announces your purpose and, paradoxically, hides you at the same time. It will not make you welcome, but it will make you understood. You take the darkest, most heavy hooded cloak. Its coarsened smells of damp earth and wood smoke. When you pull the hood low, it casts your entire face in shadow, revealing only the rough stubble on your chin. It's a garment of anonymity, a way to be seen without being seen. Next, you find a sturdy branch of ash wood, long and straight, and you spend hours smoothing it with a sharp stone. It is not just a walking stick. It is a staff, an emblem of a pilgrim or a wanderer. It gives you a reason to be on the road, a prop to lean on that also serves to keep people at a distance. Finally, you need the most important tool. You take a block of soft birch wood and, with your small, dull knife, you begin to carve. It's a slow, painstaking process. You are not a craftsman, but you work with a focused intensity. You hollow out the wood, shaping it into a small, shallow bowl. It's rough and uneven, but it is a bowl. You loosen it smooth with grit from the stream bed. This is not for your own meager meals or for aged roots. This bowl will have only one purpose, to hold the bread of the dead. These items, the dark cloak, the staff, the wooden bowl, become the tools of your trade. Historians and folklore piecing together the life of the sin-eater from scattered accounts often mention these specific accoutrements. They formed a sort of unofficial uniform, a set of visual cues that immediately identified the person in their grim profession. It was a way of branding oneself, which served a dual purpose. It warned the general populace to keep their distance, and it acted as a grim form of advertising for those in need of your specific services. There's a strange and rather sad detail that some sources mention about the sin-eater's bowl. It was said that they often carried it with them, but upside down, either tucked into their belt or held in their hand. It was only turned right side up when they were actively performing the ritual. It was a small but potent symbol, a vessel for sin that remained closed and inactive until it was needed. Once your grim toolkit is complete, you are ready. You wrap the bowl in a piece of cloth, take up your staff, and pull the heavy hood over your face. You feel a profound change come over you. You are no longer just a wretched outcast. You are now embodying a role. You are becoming the sin-eater. The costume gives you a strange sense of purpose, a shield against the world's contempt. You travel for a day avoiding main roads, keeping to the ancient tracks that wind through the hills. You are heading towards a different village, a place where you are not yet a monster. As you approach it in the late afternoon, you don't enter. You stop at the edge of the woods, where the wild land meets the cultivated fields, and you wait. You find a spot by an old, gnarled tree at a crossroads, a place travelers must pass. You sit on a rock, your staff across your knees, your shadowed face looking towards the ground. You do not beg, you do not speak. You just sit, a silent, ominous sentinel. People passing by give you a wide berth. A farmer driving a cart pulls his horse to the far side of the road. A woman carrying a basket of laundry clutches her children close and hurries past, whispering for them not to look. They don't know who you are, not exactly. But your appearance, the dark cloak, the withdrawn posture is enough. You are a figure of ill-minus omen, a disruption to their ordinary day. And that is exactly what you want. You are not trying to rejoin their world. You are establishing yourself on its border. You are a silent announcement, a presence that speaks of death and what comes after. You are making yourself known not as a person but as a possibility, a grim solution to a terrible problem. You sit there as the sun begins to set, a lonely, still figure. The silver groat is still in your pouch. You haven't spent it. Today was not about commerce. It was about solidifying your new identity. You have acquired the tools, and now you have taken your place at the edge of the world waiting. Waiting for the inevitable. Waiting for the next knock in the night. The waiting becomes your new existence. Days are spent in a state of quiet, watchful stillness, a stark contrast to the churning chaos of borrowed memories inside your head. You become a fixture at the crossroads, a piece of the landscape as regular as the rising and setting of the sun. You learn to read the traffic of the path, the brisk walk of a man heading to the market, the brisk gossiping pace of women returning from the well, the weary trudge of a laborer at day's end. They, in turn, learn you. The initial fear and suspicion soften into a kind of wary acceptance. You are the strange, silent man who lives in the woods. You are a bad omen, a touch of darkness at the edge of their well-lit world. But you are a consistent one. You never ask for anything. You never cause any trouble. You simply exist, a brooding question mark on their horizon. And then, one evening, the rhythm changes. A young boy, no more than 10, comes running down the path from the village. He is breathless, his face pale with urgency. He doesn't shy away from you. He runs right up to you, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and the grim importance of his errand. It's the blacksmith's wife, he pants. She's gone. Her time came this afternoon. He looks at you, his gaze direct and unwavering. They sent me. They need you. The words hang in the twilight air. They need you. It's the second time in your life you have heard that phrase, and it chills you to the bone. You give a slow single nod. The boy, his message delivered, turns and flees back towards the village, as if the devil himself were at his heels. You get to your feet, your joints stiff from the long day of sitting. You pick up your staff, your hand closing around the smooth, familiar wood. Here it is again. The call. The summons. You had hoped, in some small, foolish part of your mind, that the first time was a fluke, a one-off horror. But now you know. This is your life. You follow the path to the village. This time, there is no guide with a lantern. You know the way. As you enter the cluster of cottages, the reaction is the same as before. A sudden hushing of activity, a door quickly shut. A face vanishing from a window. But there is a difference. Before, it was pure revulsion. Now, there is a sliver of something else, grim necessity. You are no longer just a monster. You are their monster, a tool they have summoned. You find the blacksmith's forge, its great hearth cold and dark. The cottage beside it has the familiar lone candle burning in the window. The door is ajar, an invitation. You step inside. The scene is achingly similar to the last one. A shrouded body, this time smaller, more delicate. A grieving husband, the blacksmith, a mountain of a man, reduced to a weeping wreck by the side of the table, a few quiet neighbors offering silent, helpless comfort. The routine of death is a powerful and historically consistent thing. Funerary customs, whether official religions like this one, provide structure in the face of chaos. They are a set of instructions to follow when grief has robbed you of the ability to think. You are a key part of this unofficial, but deeply felt, set of instructions. Your presence signals that the proper order of things, however grim, is being followed. The ritual unfolds just as it did before. The bread and ale are brought forth. The litany of sins is recited over the body. By this time the words are softer, the transgressions listed more out of duty than deep conviction. She was a good woman, they say. Kind, but everyone has something to account for. A moment of vanity, a sharp word, a secret envy. You perform your role. You eat the tasteless bread. You drink the bitter ale. And you feel it, another life pouring into you. This time, it's different from old man Hemlock's. There's no hard, stubborn pride. Instead, there's a flicker of anxiety, a constant, low thrum of worry about a child's cough, about a failed batch of preserves. You feel a pang of deep, maternal love, so fierce it takes your breath away, followed by a wave of regret for a moment of impatience. It confirms the most terrifying suspicion of your new trade. Each soul is unique. Each set of sins is a distinct emotional signature. You are not just accumulating a formless mass of negativity. You are collecting individual lives, individual sorrows. Your own soul is becoming a crowded graveyard of other people's ghosts. After the meal is finished and the empty bowl is placed on the table, you are paid. Another silver groat pressed into your hand by the blacksmith, who refuses to meet your eyes. Then comes the inevitable, harsh command, go. You are cast out again, back into the night. This time, the villagers' curses are quieter, more perfunctory. This is business. This is the way it works. You have provided a service. You have been paid. Now, you must disappear. You walk back to your ruin in the woods, the 2 coins now clinking softly in your pouch. You have a routine. A grim, repeatable pattern for your days, measured not by sunrises, but by funerals. You are the final punctuation mark at the end of a person's life. A bizarre but recorded piece of folklore surrounding sin-eaters is that some were said to have a fixed price. For example, a groat for a man, slightly less for a child, whose sins were believed to be fewer and lighter. This morbid price list reinforces the idea sin is a quantifiable substance, something that could be measured and paid for, like a pound of flour or a yard of cloth. Historians are still debating whether this was a widespread practice or just a local quirk, but it speaks to the strange, transcational nature of this belief system. Back in your hovel, use it by your small fire, the warmth doing little to dispel the chill deep inside you. You now carry the weight of 2 souls. The stubborn farmer and the anxious mother. Their memories flicker at the edges of your own. Their emotions bubble up at unexpected moments. You look down at your hands in the firelight. They are your hands, but they ache with a blacksmith's grief and a farmer's rheumatism. You close your eyes, but you see a child's smiling face that you have no reason to know. You are becoming a collage of other people's lives. And a terrifying question begins to form in your mind. How many souls can one person hold before they shatter completely? The calls become more frequent as the autumn deepens into a wet, bone-minus chilling winter. Sickness, a constant companion in the villages, becomes more aggressive, and the candle in the window appears with a grim regularity. You are summoned for the old and the young, the respected and the reviled. You are becoming an expert in the geography of grief. Each ritual is a variation on a theme. The cottage is always small and dark, smelling of herbs and fear. The mourners are always shattered, their faces masks of sorrow. The bread is always tasteless, the ale always bitter. But the experience, the transfer of a life's failings is always unique. You learn that sin is not a uniform substance. It has flavors. It has textures. You are called to the bedside of a wealthy farmer, a man known for his sharp dealings and his heavy purse. As you consume the meal from his broad steel chest, you are flooded with a wave of cold, calculating greed. You feel the thrill of a cheated business partner, the satisfaction of a boundary stone moved an inch in the night. It's a sharp, metallic taste in your soul, a feeling of grasping, of holding on too tight. For days after counting your 2 miserable coins over and over, possessed by an avarice that is not your own. A week later, you are summoned for a young woman who died in childbirth. The grief in this cottage is different, sharper, a wound that shrieks with injustice. As you eat the bread, you don't feel malice or greed. Instead, you are filled with a profound, aching regret, a life of unfinished things. You feel the ghost of her love for her husband, the fierce, nascent love for the child she never got to hold. Her sins are small, ethereal things, a moment of envy for her sister's easier life, a flash of vanity about her hair. They are like whispers, not shouts. After this ritual, you are haunted by a deep and persistent sorrow, a sense of something beautiful lost forever. This idea that the nature of the deceased's life could affect the sin-8 is a core part of the folklore. While the church preached that all sin was an offense against God, the folk belief was more nuanced. There was a sense that there were heavy souls and light souls. The soul of a cruel moneylender would be a heavier burden for the sin-eater to carry than the soul of a kind, if imperfect, young mother. This is a detail rarely discussed in mainstream historical texts, which tend to focus on the ritual's function rather than its perceived emotional or spiritual mechanics. You even attend the death of a man who was, himself, an outcast. A drunkard and a brawler, feared and despised in equal measure, who died in a freezing ditch. There is no grieving family, only a few grim minus-faced villagers who have pooled their pennies to see him properly dispatched, more for their own peace of mind than for his. They want to be sure his angry, troubled spirit will not linger to haunt the village lanes. Eating his sins is a chaotic, violent experience. You are hit with waves of blistering rage, of self-loathing so profound it makes you physically nauseous. You taste the sour bitterness of cheap ale and the sting of a fistfight. It's a jagged, broken knife, and for a full day after, you feel a restless, angry energy that makes you want to smash your fists against the stone walls of your ruin. One of the most peculiar and debated questions among historians is whether the sin-eater was ever called for the death of a child. It's a complex issue. On one hand, the doctrine of original sin meant that even an infant was technically not without sin. On the other, the idea of a child having accumulated a lifetime of transgressions to be eaten was, too many, nonsensical. The historical record is almost silent on this, likely because infant mortality was so common it was treated differently, and the sin-eaters themselves left no records. The consensus is that it was probably rare, but not impossible, in communities with a particularly strong and literal interpretation of the belief. Through all of this, you become a connoisseur of human failing. You learn that every life, no matter how it appears on the outside, is a complex tapestry of light and shadow. The pious churchwarden's soul is tainted with a secret, corrosive pride. The village gossip's soul is filled not with malice, but with a desperate, crippling loneliness. You are granted an intimate, God's eye view of the community, seeing the hidden truths behind the public faces. This knowledge is a terrible burden. It isolates you even further. When you journey to a nearby town to spend a hard-earned coin on supplies, you can't see the people in the market for who they are. You see them as collections of potential sins. You look at a laughing merchant and wonder about his greed. You see a pair of young lovers and wonder about their future betrayals. You see the raw material of the meals you will one day have to eat. You are the secret keeper, the spiritual refuse collector. You know the dark underbelly of the human heart better than the priest himself. But this knowledge brings you no power, no wisdom, are no longer just yourself. You are a multitude, a walking, breathing archive of every soul you have ever saved. The faces of the dead do not leave you. They are your constant, silent companions. In the flickering firelight of your ruin, you see the stern jaw of the greedy farmer. In the reflection on a still pool of water, you see the sad, tired eyes of the blacksmith's wife. They are not ghosts in the traditional sense. They do not speak or moan. They are impressions, burned into your memory, their presence interwoven with the emotional baggage you now carry for them. Winter tightens its grip on the land. The world outside your shelter is a frozen, silent blow of grey and white. The physical hardship of survival is immense, but it is nothing compared to the war being waged inside your own mind. The weight of the souls you've consumed is no longer a series of distinct events. It's beginning to coalesce into a single crushing mass. You start having trouble sleeping. When you do drift off, your dreams are a chaotic jumble of borrowed lives. You find yourself walking down a village lane you've never been to, but your feet know the way. You feel a surge of affection for a dog you've never met. You taste a specific type of stew you've never eaten, and you know with absolute certainty that it needs more salt. These are not your memories, but they have the vividness and emotional resonance of your own. Your mind is becoming a library where all the books have been left open, their pages fluttering and mixing together in a constant, confusing breeze. This psychological toll is the unspoken horror of the sin-eater's existence. While villagers feared the sin-eater for the spiritual danger they represented, the true torment was internal. There's no historical document, no diary of a sin-eater, to tell us what this felt like. but we can infer it from the folklore, from the sheer terror with which they were regarded. People believed the sins were a real, tangible burden, and that this burden would inevitably crush the person who carried it. You begin to talk to yourself, not out of a desperate need to anchor your own identity. You will be tending your fire and find yourself muttering, "My name is," and you have to struggle for a moment to recall the name you were born with, a name no one has spoken aloud to you in years. It's being buried under the names of the dead, Hemlock, Fletcher, or Reese. The weight of 100 souls, or even a dozen, is not a poetic metaphor for you. It's a lived reality. You feel their anxieties as a constant tightness in your own chest. You feel their regrets as a sour taste in your mouth. You wake in the middle of phantom fear that belongs to a man who died of a sudden fever 2 weeks ago. You are experiencing the echoes of their lives, the aftershocks of their emotions. One of the more obscure beliefs associated with your profession is the idea that the physical health of the sin-eater was linked to their spiritual burden. Folktales sometimes describe sin-eaters as being gaunt and perpetually unwell, as if the sins they consumed were a kind of spiritual poison that manifested as a physical ailment. It wasn't just hardship and poor diet that made them sick. It was the job itself. Whether this was a literal belief or a way of explaining their wretched appearance, scholars still debate, but for you, it feels true. You are always tired. Your body aches with a weariness that no amount of sleep can cure. There are moments of dangerous confusion. One afternoon, you are gathering firewood when you see a hawk circling overhead. For a split second, you feel a hot surge of rage, an instinct to find a stone and hurl it at the bird. You freeze, your hand half-minus raised, horrified and bewildered by the impulse. It takes you a long moment to realize where it came from. The greedy farmer. You remember from the transfer, a fleeting memory of his anger at the hawks that preyed on his chickens. His rage is still rattling around inside you, looking for an outlet. You begin to take deliberate steps to fight back, to reclaim the territory of your own mind. You develop small rituals. Every morning, you face the rising sun and speak your own name aloud 3 times. You trace the lines on your own palm, trying to remember what your hands looked like before they ached with the ghosts of other men's labor. You try to recall a memory, just one, from your life before you were the sin-eater. A favorite food, the face of your mother. But the memories are faint, washed minus out, like old tapestries bleached by the sun. They struggle to compete with the vivid, violent, sorrowful memories of the dead you carry. You are not a person anymore. You are a container, a vessel. Your own life, your own story, is being erased, overwritten by the final chapters of dozens of other stories. And the most terrifying part is the quiet, creeping realization that you are running out of space. There is only so much room in one soul. What happens when you are finally completely full? Do you simply cease to be you at all? The thought is a cold knot of terror that even the fiercest hunger never match. Life settles into its grim pattern of solitude punctuated by somber rituals. You are a creature of the woods, a shadow at the crossroads, a grim functionary in the cottages of the grieving. The human world is a place you visit, but never inhabit. You have come to expect the fear, the revulsion, the hasty retreat of anyone who crosses your path. It is the air you breathe. Then one day something different happens. It's a rare, bright afternoon in late winter. The sun a pale, watery disk in the sky. You are in your usual spot, a still and silent figure, when you see a woman and a small child walking up the path from the village. You pull your hood lower, instinctively making yourself smaller, less threatening. The woman, seeing you, does the predictable thing. She tightens her grip on the child's hand and steers them to the far side of the path, her face a mask of anxious disapproval. But the child, a little girl of perhaps 4 or 5 with wide, curious eyes, does not seem to share her mother's fear. She is not yet old enough to have fully absorbed the intricate social tapestry of superstition and prejudice. To her, you are not a monster. You are just a strange, interesting shape. She hangs back, pulling against her mother's hand, her gaze fixed on you. You keep your own eyes on the ground, on your worn-out shoes on a patch of hardy moss growing on the rock beside you. To meet her gaze would be a transgression. "Who is that man, Mama?" The child's voice pipes up, clear as a bell in the quiet air. "Hush now, Elspeth," the mother mutters, her voice low and tense. "Don't stare. It's rude." She gives a sharp tug on the girl's arm, trying to hurry her along. But the child is persistent. "But why is he all covered up? Is he cold?" This simple, innocent question is so far removed from the usual reactions you receive that it feels like a physical blow. She doesn't see a vessel of sin. She sees a man who might be cold. Before the mother can shush her again, the little girl pulls her hand free. And then, she does something extraordinary. She takes a few steps towards you. Her mother lets out a choked gasp of horror, frozen in place. The girl, Elspeth, stops about 10 feet away from you. She is holding a small, slightly bruised apple in her hand. She looks at you, then at the apple, then back at you. She doesn't say a word, she just holds it out. A small, silent offering. For a long moment you don't move. You don't breathe. Your mind, so used to navigating the dark corridors of dead men's souls, is completely unprepared for this. This is not a transaction. This is not a payment for a grim service. This is kindness, a pure, uncalculated act of kindness. This moment highlights a fascinating but rarely documented aspect of the Sin Manasita's story, the role of children. In a world saturated with folklore and fear, children often existed in a space of partial innocence. They were told the scary stories, certainly, but they hadn't yet learned the deep, ingrained revulsion of the adults. Historical accounts are silent on such interactions, but it's a logical and deeply poignant possibility. A child's perception, unclouded by complex theology or social stigma, might be the only unfiltered human contact Sin Manasita ever experienced. Slowly, as if lifting a great weight, you raise your head. You let the hood fall back just enough so she can see your face. You don't know what she sees. A gaunt, bearded man with haunted eyes, I imagine. But she doesn't flinch. Her expression remains one of simple, open curiosity. You cannot accept the apple. To take something from her to make physical contact would be to risk. What? Tainting her? The superstitious part of your mind, a part that has grown stronger with every ritual, screams that you are a source of spiritual contagion. So you do the only thing you can. You offer her a small, hesitant smile. It's a rusty, unfamiliar movement of your facial muscles. It feels weak and fragile, but it is genuine. And in that smile, you try to convey your gratitude. Thank you. I see what you are offering. You are a good child. Elspeth, get back here this instant. The mother finally shrieks, her fear overcoming her paralysis. She rushes forward, snatches the child by the arm, and pulls her away, scolding her in a harsh, panicked whisper. Never, ever do that again. The little girl looks back at you over her shoulder, her face confused, the apple still clutched in her hand. Then she is gone, hurried down the path, out of sight. You are left alone again in the sudden, ringing silence. The brief, impossible moment is over, but it has changed something inside you. That little girl's glance, her simple human gesture, has pierced through the layers of other men's sins. It found you, the person buried underneath. For the first time in a very long time, you feel a tear trace a path through the dirt on your cheek. It is not a tear of grief or fear or borrowed sorrow. It is your own. The weight of 100 souls feels, just for a moment, a tiny bit lighter, and you realize with a pang of astonishing pain that there is still someone in there to be saved. The brief warmth ignited by the child's gesture fades as the harsh realities of your existence reassert themselves. The coins in your pouch have multiplied. Each funeral adds another to the collection. You should, by the standards of your former life, feel wealthy. You possess a small hoard of silver, more money than you've ever had at one time. But you are quickly learning the bitter irony of your payment. You are a man with money that is almost impossible to spend. Your supplies are dwindling again. You need salt, a new knife, maybe a sturdy pot to replace the cracked one you've been nursing. These are things you cannot forage from the woods. They require commerce. They require you to enter a town. You choose a market town a full day's walk away, a place large enough that you hope to be just another anonymous face in the crowd. You leave your staff and bowl behind, hidden in your ruin. You wear your most unremarkable rags, hoping to look like a simple beggar, not the object of supernatural dread you have become. As you enter the bustling marketplace, the sheer volume of life is a physical assault on your senses. The smells of baking bread, of livestock, of unwashed humanity, the sounds of merchants hawking their wares, of children laughing, of a blacksmith's hammer ringing on an anvil. It's a world you no longer belong to, and the noise and color of it all makes you feel dizzy and exposed. You approach a baker's stall, the source of a smell so wonderful it's almost painful. Piled high are loaves of all shapes and sizes, their golden minus brown crusts shining in the sun. Your hand goes to the pouch at your neck. You have the means to buy every loaf on this table. The baker is a large, cheerful man with flour dusting his eyebrows. He's serving a customer, laughing at some shared joke. You wait, trying to make yourself as small as possible. When the customer leaves, the baker turns to you. His smile falters slightly as he takes in your gaunt appearance and draggled clothes. "Yes," he asks, his tone shifting from cheerful to cautious. You clear your throat. Your voice is a rusty croak from disuse. "I loaf." You manage to say, "Please." You pull a silver groat from your pouch and place it on the counter. The baker's eyes fix on the coin. It's a good, solid piece of silver. More than enough for a loaf. But he doesn't pick it up. He looks from the coin to your face, his eyes narrowing. He's seen coins like this before, perhaps. He's heard the stories. A central, and often overlooked, aspect of the sin minus seater's plight was this economic exclusion. It wasn't just social ostracism, it was a form of financial blacklisting. The money a sin minus seater earned was considered cursed or dirty. It was payment for a dark art, and many people believed that to accept it. That created a terrible paradox. You were paid for your work, but that very payment became a symbol of your damnation, making it difficult to use. The baker looks around his stall, then at the other shoppers nearby. He leans forward, his voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Where did you get this coin, friend?" You don't know what to say. The truth is impossible. Life feels too complicated. You just stare at him, your silence a confession. He understands. His face hardens. "I've no bread for you," he says, pushing the coin back towards you with the tip of his finger, careful not to touch it with his skin. "Be on your way. You'll bring no ill luck to my stall." The rejection is quiet, but absolute. It's a knife in your gut. You snatch the coin and stumble away, your face burning with a shame that, for once, is entirely your own. You try again at a stall selling iron goods, hoping to buy a knife. The merchant, a weary man with suspicious eyes, gives you the same treatment. He sees the coin, asks the question, and then waves you away with a look of disgust. "We want no truck with your kind here," he says loud enough for those nearby to hear. A murmur ripples through the crowd. People begin to stare at you. They don't know for certain what you are, but they can guess. The gaunt look, the haunted eyes, the possession of a silver coin that no one will take. The whispers start, "Sin minus eater." The word passes from person to person like a contagion. Panic seizes you. The bustling marketplace suddenly feels like a trap, the walls of people closing in on you. You turn and flee, pushing your way through the crowd, their hostile, fearful faces blurring into a single monstrous visage. You don't stop running until you are far outside the town, your lungs aching. You have failed. You still have your coins, but your belly is empty and your hands hold no new knife. The money is a curse. It is a brand that identifies you. Historians still debate the extent of this economic shunning. In some areas it may have been absolute. In others, a sin minus eater might have found a desperate or unscrupulous merchant, willing to take their money, perhaps charging an exorbitant rate for the privilege. Or, they might have had to rely on a go minus between, a fellow outcast willing to clean, the money for a hefty fee. The system was informal, unwritten, and varied from place to place, but the core principle remained. The wages of sin were not welcome in the world of ordinary commerce. You finally make it back to your ruin as night falls, utterly defeated. You tip the coins from your pouch into your palm and stare at them in the moonlight. They are beautiful. They are worthless. They are the perfect symbol of your life, a salvation for others that is a damnation for you. You have performed a vital service for these communities, cleansed their dead, and eased their minds. In return, they have given you money they refuse to accept, ensuring you can never truly use it to escape the very poverty that forced you into this life in the first place. It is the cruelest of traps. Your isolation deepens. The failed attempt to reintegrate, even for a moment, at the marketplace has taught you a bitter lesson. You are not meant to interact with the world of the living, except in the presence of the dead. You retreat further into yourself and your role, becoming the creature they expect you to be. You no longer try to hide your profession. When you take up your vigil at the crossroads, you place your wooden bowl beside you, right minus side up, a silent, empty vessel waiting to be filled. You embrace the symbols of your trade, because they are the only identity you have left. The villagers, in turn, respond by weaving you into the fabric of their folklore. You are no longer just a man. You are a local phenomenon, a fixture of the landscape as real as feared as a treacherous marsh or a haunted grove. You become a story they tell their children, a cautionary tale whispered by the fireside. You learn this one evening, crouched in the thick undergrowth at the edge of the woods, a place you sometimes go to simply watch the distant, unattainable glow of the village. You overhear a group of men walking home from the tavern, their voices loud and loose with ale. "And I tell you, I saw him today," one man says, his voice a dramatic hush, "sitting by the old oak still as a stone. He never blinks, they say, just stares at the ground, waiting for the devil to call him." "My Sarah said she saw him last week," another chimes in. "She dropped her basket of eggs. She got such a fright. She swears his feet don't rightly touch the ground when he walks." A third man laughs, a nervous, shaky sound. "That's nothing. Old man Gable swears the sin-minus-seater can talk to crows, that they bring him news of who is sick and dying. He is more than a man. He is. He is a thing of the night." You listen to this, hidden in the shadows, and a strange, detached feeling comes over you. But the person they are describing is a stranger, a supernatural monster, a bogeyman. They have taken the grim reality of your existence, a starving outcast performing a desperate ritual, and transformed it into something fantastical and terrifying. This process of mythologization is a common historical phenomenon, especially concerning figures on the fringes of society. Executioners, midwives, cunning miners, folklore was subject to a similar transformation. Their necessary but unsettling roles in the community made people uncomfortable, so they were pushed into the realm of the supernatural. It was easier to believe you were dealing with a creature of dark magic than to confront the unsettling reality that your own neighbor, out of sheer desperation, had taken on such a grim trade. The stories you overhear become more and more elaborate. You learn that you can supposedly blight crops with a look, that you can curdle milk by walking past a dairy, that you are impossibly old, that you cannot be harmed by fire or steel. You are becoming a local legend, a piece of living folklore. One of the more bizarre and persistent myths about sin-minus-eaters, which pops up in several regional variations, is that they didn't cast a shadow. The idea was that their soul was so heavy with the sins of others that it literally absorbed the light, preventing a shadow from forming. It's a wonderfully poetic and terrifying image, and a complete fabrication, of course. You've seen your own shadow on a sunny day. It's long and thin and just as lonely as you are. But the story persists because it reinforces your otherworldly status. This transformation has a profound and disturbing effect on you. On one hand, it's a form of protection. The more monstrous and powerful they believe you to be, the less likely they are to confront you directly with simple, physical violence. Fear is a better shield than any coat of mail, but, on the other hand, it erases you completely. The last vestiges of the person you once were are being systematically scraped away and replaced by this grotesque caricature. It's a second, deeper kind of consumption. The community, having already burdened you with their dead sins, is now consuming your identity, digesting it into a form that fits their narrative, their need for a monster in the wood. You start to see this legend reflected in their eyes when you are summoned. They no longer see a wretched man. They see the creature from their stories. Their hands tremble when they offer you the bread. They cannot meet your gaze, not out of simple fear, but out of a deep, superstitious terror. They are interacting with a myth, not a man. You retreat to your ruin, the men's drunken words echoing in your ears. HES, a thing of the night. You look at your dirt-stained hands, at your own reflection in a puddle. You see a tired, hungry, lonely man. But you are beginning to wonder, if everyone tells the story of a monster, do you eventually become one? The line between who you are and who they think you are is becoming dangerously thin, and you are standing on the wrong side of it. In the complex social ecosystem of the village, there is one figure whose silence on your existence is more profound than any villager's shouted curse or fearful whisper. The priest. He is a man you see only from a distance, a figure in black robes moving between the stone church and his small, tidy vicarage. He is the official warden of the village's soul, the licensed agent of salvation. And you are his unofficial, unregulated, and deeply heretical competition. You feel his eyes on you sometimes. When you are on the road and his path happens to cross yours, he doesn't scowl or shout like the others. He gives you a long, unreadable look, a mixture of pity, contempt, and something that might be a grudging acknowledgement. Then he makes the sign of the cross, a quick, almost reflexive gesture, and continues on his way. He never speaks a word to you. His position is a deeply conflicted one, a fact that historians of folk religion find endlessly fascinating. From the pulpit, he must condemn you. The act of sin-seating is a popish superstition, a pagan blasphemy. It bypasses the church, challenges its authority, and suggests that salvation can be bought and sold over a corpse with a piece of bread rather than earned through prayer, penance, and the sacraments. Officially, he is your sworn spiritual enemy, but in private his situation is far more complicated. He is not a bishop in a grand cathedral. He is a parish priest in a small, isolated community where the old ways die hard. He knows that the faith of his flock is a messy, complicated thing. They will attend his church on Sunday and listen to his sermons on God's grace, but on Monday, if a cow gets sick, they might also visit the local cunning miner's woman for a charm. Their first instinct might not be prayer but a desperate, whispered call for you. He understands the terror that drives them. The fear of damnation was not an abstract theological concept for these people. It was a vivid, terrifying reality. Hell was a place of literal fire and eternal torment, and the thought of a loved one suffering there was unbearable. The church offered a path to heaven, but it was a long, uncertain one. You offered a shortcut, a direct, tangible, and immediate solution. You were a form of spiritual insurance, so the priest engages in a delicate, unspoken dance of tolerance. He must maintain his authority, but he cannot afford to alienate his entire flock by harshly forbidding a practice they believe is essential. And so, he looks the other way. He hears the whispers of your summons, but does not investigate. He sees you from a distance, but does not confront you. He allows this shadow economy of sin to operate just outside his official jurisdiction. One of the great unresolved debates among scholars is how much active versus passive tolerance there was. Did some priests, in the most isolated areas, tacitly approve of the sin-eater, seeing it as a flawed, but perhaps effective way of bringing peace to the grieving? Or was it always an adversarial relationship? The records are ambiguous. Court and church documents that mention sin-eaters are almost always condemnatory, but this might not reflect the more complex reality on the ground. The truth is likely somewhere in the middle, varying from one parish to the next. You feel this complex relationship one bleak afternoon. You are at the crossroads when the priest himself walks by. He is returning from a visit to a sick parishioner on an outlying farm. He walks slowly, his head bowed, a book of prayers in his hand. As he approaches, you instinctively shrink back, expecting the usual quick sign of the cross and the averted gaze. But today he stops. He doesn't stop to face you. He stops a dozen paces away, turning his gaze to the grey, wintry fields. He stands there for a long moment, a black miner's-robed statue against the bleak landscape. You are both held in a strange, silent blow. the official and the unofficial, the shepherd and the scapegoat. God have mercy on us all, he says, his voice quiet, not directed at you, but at the empty fields, at the sky, at the world itself. It is not a condemnation. It is not a blessing. It is a statement of profound, weary resignation. It is an acknowledgement of the broken, fearful world you both inhabit. A world where people are so afraid of God's judgment that they will turn to a practice that the priest himself must call a sin. In that single, quiet sentence, you hear the entirety of his conflict. He is a man of God, forced to preside over a flock that still believes in magic. Then, without another word, he continues on his way, his shoulders slightly stooped. He has, in his own way, finally spoken to you. He has acknowledged your existence, your role, and the shared, desperate humanity that binds you, even as your beliefs divide you. You watch him go, feeling a strange sense of clarity. You are not just a monster to the villagers. To the church, you are a symptom of their own failure to completely soothe the deepest fears of the human heart. You exist in the space where their prayers are not quite enough, and the priest in his weary, conflicted soul knows it. The seasons turn, and your world expands. The reputation of the crossroads man spreads on the wind, carried by travelers and gossips from one village to the next. The calls for your service begin to come from further afield. A desperate message from a hamlet over the western ridge, a somber summons from a farming community a day's journey to the south. You are no longer tethered to one place. You are becoming a pariah on the road. Your life transforms into a series of long, lonely walks through a muted, indifferent landscape. You travel the ancient trackways, the hollow-ways worn deep into the earth by centuries of footsteps, keeping to the shadows of the hedgerows. You move like a ghost, sleeping in barns when you can, in ditches when you must. The world of men is a series of cottages into the wilderness. Each new village is the same story in a different setting. The fearful whispers, the hostile stares, the bolted doors. You are a known quantity now. Your dark cloak, your staff, your empty bowl, they are your passport and your curse, announcing your arrival and ensuring your immediate departure once your work is done. You are a walking, breathing embodiment of the taboo. This itinerant lifestyle is a key feature in many historical descriptions of sin-minus eaters. They were rarely, if ever, integrated members of a single community. Their profession made that impossible. They were forced into a life of wandering, moving from place to place as their services were needed, or as they were driven out. They were perpetual outsiders belonging nowhere, their only community the silent company of the dead they carried within them. The road is a harsh and lonely companion. It offers no comfort, only an endless stretch of mud or dust. But it also gives you a strange kind of freedom. Out here, between the settlements, you are not the sin-minus eater. You are just a man walking. You are defined not by their fear, but by the rhythm of your own footsteps and the ache in your own legs. You watch the kestrels hang in the wind. You notice the first primroses of spring. You feel the sun on your face. Simple moments of connection to the natural world become your only solace. They are yours untainted by the sins of others, but the solitude is immense. You go for weeks without speaking a word to another human being, other than the grim, formulaic interactions of the ritual. Your voice, when you are forced to use it, feels like a foreign object in your own throat. One day you encounter another traveler on the road. A peddler, his back bent under a heavy pack of goods. He is a cheerful, chatty sort, and not knowing who you are, he falls into step beside you, eager for company. A grey day for a long walk, if friend, he says, wiping a sleeve across his brow. Where are you bound? You are so startled by the casual, friendly address that you can only manage a mumbled grunt in reply. He is undeterred. He chatters on about the price of tin, the pure quality of the ale in the last town, a funny story about a pig. You walk beside him in a state of profound, anxious silence. Every instinct screams at you to pull away to hide. This is a language you have forgotten how to speak, a world of simple, human connection you are no longer licensed to enter. He eventually notices your complete lack of response. His cheerful chatter falters. He gives you a sideways look, taking in your shadowy hood, your grim silence, your deliberate distance. A flicker of understanding, then suspicion, then fear, dawns in his eyes. Right then, he says, his voice suddenly brisk. I'll be taking the fork up ahead. Good day to you. He increases his pace, putting distance between you, and takes a turn minus off you both know leads nowhere. He would rather walk an extra mile through the woods than spend another minute in your company. The encounter leaves you feeling hollowed out. It is a stark reminder of the invisible wall that now separates you from the rest of humanity. Even when you are not known, you are known. Your burden has changed you in some fundamental way that people can sense, even if they don't understand it. A particularly bleak but persistent bit of folklore about sin-eaters was that their curse was contagious, but not in a magical way. It was believed that if someone were to share a normal meal with a sin-eater or offer them hospitality, they would be shunned by association. To befriend a sin-eater was to risk becoming an outcast yourself. Whether this was a widely held belief or a more localized superstition is, like so much about you, a matter of historical debate. So you walk on alone, a pariah on the road. You carry the sins of their dead, and in doing so you have become a sin yourself. They sin against the social order, against the idea of community. You are the price they pay for their peace of mind, a price they are reminded of every time they see your lonely figure moving along the horizon, a dark speck in the vast, uncaring landscape. Fear is a constant, low hum in the background of your life. The fear in the eyes of the villagers, the superstitious terror that surrounds your work. But it's their fear, not yours. You have grown accustomed to it, learned to wear it like a second cloak. Your own fears are deeper, more internal, the fear of losing yourself, of the crushing weight of the souls inside you. But one night, their fear becomes your fear. It coalesces from a passive, superstitious dread into an active, aggressive threat. It happens in a small, insular village nestled in a deep valley, a place with a reputation for being unwelcoming to outsiders. You have been summoned for an old shepherd who died alone in his remote cottage. The ritual is performed, the coin is paid, and you are cast out into a moonless, starless night. As you walk the dark, muddy track leading away from the village, you sense something is wrong. The usual silence that follows your departure is absent. Instead, there's a low murmur, a sound like a disturbed hive. Ahead, where the track meets the main road, you see a flicker of light. Then another, torches. A knot of cold dread tightens in your stomach. This is not the usual furtive, fearful shunning. This is something else. You slow your pace, your hand tightening on your staff. You can hear their voices now, indistinct but laced with an ugly, angry energy. As you draw closer, you see them. A mob. Perhaps a dozen men, their faces flushed with a strange, righteous fury, their features made monstrous by the dancing torchlight. They are blocking the road. There he is. One of them growls. The soul miner stealer. He's filled with the sins of Black Tom. Another shouts. He's a vessel of filth. He shouldn't be allowed to walk among decent folk. This is a terrifying but historically plausible scenario. While the sin-eater provided a necessary service, they also represented a deep-seated anxiety. They were a living reminder of sin, death, and forbidden magic. In times of hardship, a bad harvest, a spate of illness, that anxiety could easily boil over into violence. The sin-eater was the perfect scapegoat, a physical target for the community's fears and frustrations. Historical records are sparse on direct violence against sin-eaters, but records of violence against other outcasts, like witches or vagrants, are common. It's a dark but logical extension. You stop. Your mind races. You could run, flee back into the darkness. But you are weary, and some small, stubborn part of you, a part that has been silent for too long, refuses to be chased like a dog. You have served them. You have taken on their darkness. And this is their gratitude. You stand your ground, your staff held loosely at your side, your face hidden in the shadows of your hood. The leader of the mob, a burly man you recognize from the morning cottage, steps forward. He holds a heavy cudgel in one hand. "We want you gone," he says, his voice thick with menace. "Not just from our village, from these lands. We don't want your kind here bringing your bad luck and your dark ways." Black Tom was a sinner, another man calls out from the crowd, and now all his wickedness is inside him. He'll blight our fields. This is the terrible logic of their belief system turned against you. You have done your job too well. You have absorbed the sins of a man they despised, and now they despise you with the same intensity. They have conflated you with the sins you carry. A strange calmness settles over you. You look at their faces, twisted with a fear that has become hatred. You see the torches, the crude weapons. And you understand that this has always been the unspoken end of the bargain. They pay you a coin, and they reserve the right to punish you for accepting it. "I am leaving," you say, your voice a low, even rasp. It's the most you've spoken in weeks, and the sound of it surprises even you. Not fast enough, the leader spits. He takes another step forward, raising his cudgel. "We'll give you a reason to hurry." This is the moment, the precipice. The mob is a fickle beast, a creature of emotion, not reason. A single thrown stone, a single forward surge, and it will be over. But before the leader can act, a different voice cuts through the tension. "Enough." An old woman pushes her way to the front of the mob. She is the village matriarch, the local midwife, a woman whose authority is rooted not in wealth or title, but in age and experience. It was her son you served 2 winters ago. She stands between you and the mob, her small, weary frame radiating in unexpected power. "Have you all lost your minds?" She scolds, her voice sharp as a shard of glass. You call for him in your hour of need. You beg him to ease the passage of your dead. And then you threaten him on the road like rabid dogs. She turns her fierce gaze on the leader. "You were glad enough for his service an hour ago, John Miller. You wept and prayed for him to take your father's sins. Have you forgotten that so quickly?" The man lowers his cudgel, his face a mixture of shame and sullen anger. The rest of the mob shuffles, their righteous fury deflating under the force of her words. She has not defended you. She has simply reminded them of their own hypocrisy. A fascinating undebated aspect of folk customs is the role of these wise women, or community elders. While the official power lay with the priest and the squire, the unofficial social order was often maintained by figures like this. They were the keepers of tradition, the arbiters of the old ways. It's entirely plausible that such a figure would see the sin minor seater not as an evil to be destroyed, but as a necessary, if unpleasant, part of the natural order of things. The old woman looks at you, her eyes clear and sharp in the torchlight. "Go," she says. It is not a curse or a threat. It is a simple, practical command, a dismissal. You don't need another warning. You seize the moment of hesitation, the crack in their violent certainty. You turn and walk away, your back to the silent mob. Every step is an act of will. You expect a stone to hit your back, a shout to break the spell. But there is only silence. You walk into the darkness, your heart hammering, the adrenaline singing in your veins. You have survived. But something has broken. The unspoken contract between you and the world of the living has been violated. It is no longer enough for them to fear and shun you. Now, you know they are capable of trying to destroy you. The hum of fear is now a loud, piercing scream. The encounter with the mob leaves a deep and lasting scar. You walk for days, putting as much distance as possible between yourself and that dark valley. The physical threat has passed, but it has awakened a new kind of internal dread. You are not just a pariah, you are prey. This constant, heightened state of fear changes your relationship with the dead you carry inside you. Before they were a chaotic, confusing burden. Now in your profound and enforced solitude, they start to feel like the only company you have. You retreat to your ruin, holding up for the winter, avoiding the roads, living off the stores you managed to buy with a few of your cleaner coins from a traveling tinker who asked no questions. In the long, dark, silent nights, with the wind howling outside your shelter, the library of faces in your mind becomes your entire world. You start to sort through them, not consciously at first, but as a way to pass the endless hours. You find yourself thinking of the blacksmith's wife, recalling the feeling of her fierce, maternal love. It's a clean, warm feeling, a stark contrast to the cold emptiness of your own existence. You hold on to it, turn it over in your mind, almost like a cherished personal memory. Then there is Old Man Hemlock, your first. You remember the stubborn pride, the flashes of his younger days in the sunlit fields. You find yourself feeling a strange, posthumous pity for him. His sins were not monstrous. They were the small, sad failings of a man who was probably just trying to get by, same as anyone else. You are building a relationship with the souls you've consumed. They are no longer just a formless weight. They are becoming individuals. A silent, ever-present company. This is a deep dive into the psychological speculation of the sin-eater's life. There are no historical records of this, of course. But it's a logical human response to extreme isolation and trauma. When you have no one else to talk to, you begin to converse with the voices inside your head. For you, those voices are the echoes of real people. You are, in a very real sense, the sole keeper of their final, secret legacy, the truth of their imperfect lives. You begin to give them names in your mind beyond just their professions. Anxious Alice, the mother who died in childbirth. Grasping Thomas, the wealthy farmer. Angry Jack, the town drunkard. You turn them into characters in the lonely drama of your mind. You find yourself sitting by the fire, having silent arguments with Grasping Thomas about his greed. You feel a wave of his avarice and you push back against it, telling him, "It did you no good in the end, did it? All that scraping and cheating, and you ended up just as dead as everyone else." You comfort anxious Alice. When her worries about her children bubble up in your consciousness, you soothe them, whispering, "Hush now. They are grown. They are well. Your husband is a good man." You are trying to bring peace to the dead who reside within you, perhaps as a way of finding some peace for yourself. A particularly strange and esoteric piece of folklore, mentioned in only one or two obscure sources, is the idea that the sin-eater had a duty not just to consume the sins, but to carry them to a specific place, often a river or the sea, where they could be ritually washed away. Most historians dismiss this as a conflation with other folk rituals, but it raises a fascinating question. Was there a belief in a final absolution for the sin-eater themselves? Or was the damnation considered permanent? The mainstream folklore suggests the latter, making your internal struggle even more poignant. You are not just a carrier, you are the final destination. This new, strange companionship is both a comfort and a curse. It shades off the madness of pure solitude, but it further blurs the line between your identity and theirs. Sometimes you will laugh, a short, sharp bark of a sound, at a witty retort you imagine Angry Jack making. Then you'll freeze, horrified, because you just laughed at a dead man's joke inside your own head. You are becoming the curator of a museum of souls. You walk through its halls every day, tending to the exhibits, dusting off the memories. The faces are clear to you now, the stern, the sad, the angry, the frightened. They are the only family you have. They are the residents of the haunted house of your own soul. You are their keeper, their warden, their priest, and in the dead of winter, in a ruined hut in the middle of nowhere, there is no one else. The years begin to blur. One winter melts into a spring, which sours into a summer, and then hardens back into winter again. How many years has it been? 5, 10. You've lost the ability to keep track. Your life is not measured in seasons or holidays, but in the grim tally of the dead. You have consumed so many lives, so many fragments of memory and emotion, that your own personal history has become a distant, fog-shrouded island. You look at your reflection in a still pool of water. The face that stares back is a stranger's. It is a map of hardship, etched with deep lines of sorrow and weariness. The hair is long and matted, shot through with grey. The eyes are old, not old in years, but old in the way a battlefield is old or a tomb. They have seen too much. They hold too much. One day you are trying to repair the tattered edge of your cloak, your fingers clumsy and stiff. You prick your finger with the bone needle, and a drop of dark blood wells up. You stare at it, and a simple question floats into your mind. What was my name? The question is not panicked. It is calm, detached, curious. You search for the answer, sifting through the chaotic archive of your mind. You find Hemlock, Reese, Fletcher. You find a dozen other names, the names of the souls you carry. But your own name, the one given to you by your mother, it is gone. It's not that you've simply forgotten it in the way one forgets a trivial fact. It's been crowded out, eroded, like a soft stone worn away by a constant, relentless river of other people's identities. The space in your mind where your name used to be is now occupied by the echoes of others. You try to remember your life before the hunger, before the first knock on the door of your hovel. Was there a time you laughed without it being a dead man's bitter chuckle? Did you ever love someone? A love that was entirely your own. There are faint glimmers, like sparks from a distant fire, but they are unintelligible. You can't grasp them. They are foreign. The memories of the dead are sharper, more vivid, more real than your own. You can recall with perfect clarity the taste of the ale at a wedding you never attended, but you can't remember your own father's face. This phenomenon, the complete loss of self, is the ultimate psychological endpoint of your profession. It's a concept that modern psychology might label depersonalization or identity dissolution. For you, it is a simple, terrifying fact. The sin-eater is no longer a role you play. It is all you are. The costume has fused with your skin. There's a great deal of academic debate about the historical naming conventions for outcasts. Often, people on the fringes of society would lose their family names and be known only by a descriptor of their location or profession. John the Miller or Will from the Woods. For a sin-eater, it's highly likely they would simply be known as the sin-eater. Over time, if no one uses your real name, does it even exist anymore? This is the core of the historical argument. Identity, in these small, oral communities, was a social construct. If society agrees you are only the sin-eater, then that is what you become. You stand up and walk out of your ruin, into the grey afternoon light. You are not panicked. The time for panic is long past. Instead, you feel a strange, hollow calmness, a sense of release. If you have no name, you have no past. If you have no personal sins to account for, you are an empty vessel, save for the sins of others. It's a strange and perverse kind of purity. You have become a function, a tool as impersonal as the shovel the grave digger uses. The man who once was, the man who was so hungry he made a terrible choice, is gone. He has been consumed, not by a ritual, but by the slow, steady ingestion of other life. You pick up a smooth, flat stone and with a sharp shard of flint, you try to write the first letter of your forgotten name in the dirt. Your hand hovers, a tool without instructions. Nothing comes. The connection is severed, so instead, you draw a simple shape, a circle for a bowl. You stare at it for a long time. This is your name now. This is your sigil. It is the symbol of your purpose. From that day on, you stop fighting it. You stop the small rituals of self-remembrance. You allow the memories of the dead to wash over you, to use you as their vessel. You accept your fate. Your librarian has finally left the building, leaving the books to tell their own stories through the walls of the building itself. You have forgotten your own name, and in doing so, you have finally and completely become the sin-eater. Having shed the last remnants of your former self, a strange, desolate peace settles upon you. You are no longer tormented by the struggle to preserve your own identity. You are surrendered. You are a vessel, and you drift on the currents of your grim occupation. But this surrender gives rise to a new, more profound, and far more dangerous question. It comes to you one night, after a particularly difficult ritual. The deceased was a man known for his quiet piety, a regular churchgoer who was, by all accounts, a good and decent man. Yet his family, in their grief, still felt the need for your services. Just to be sure, they'd whispered, everyone has some small thing on their conscience. You performed the rite. You ate the bread and drank the ale. But this time, something was different. You felt nothing. There was no wave of borrowed emotion, no flash of another's memory. The bread tasted like bread. The ale tasted like ale. It was just a meal. A sad, lonely meal in a room full of grieving people. Back in your ruin, the experience, or lack thereof, gnaws at you. For all these years, your entire existence has been predicated on one fundamental belief, that the ritual is real. that you are truly absorbing the sins of the dead, taking their spiritual burden into yourself, and in doing so, saving them. It is this belief that has justified your miserable existence, that has given your suffering a purpose. You suffer so that they may find peace. But what if it's not real? What if it's all just a story? A grim pantomime that you and the grieving families perform together out of a shared, desperate fear of the unknown. This is your crisis of belief. It is a question that cuts to the very core of your identity and your purpose. Are you a spiritual savior, performing a vital, magical act? Or are you just the final actor in a play for the bereaved, a con artist of the soul, taking a coin for a mouthful of bread and a few comforting words? You begin to question everything. When you felt old man Hemlock's pride, was that a true spiritual transfer? Or was it just your own starved and suggestible mind, influenced by the solemnity of the ritual, creating a sensation to match the expectation? When you felt the blacksmith's wife's sorrow, was it her ghost inside you, or was it just your own profound loneliness resonating with the grief in the room? This is a question that historians and folklorists have also grappled with. What did the sin-eaters themselves actually believe? Did they genuinely think they had the power to absorb sins, or were they cynical opportunists exploiting the superstitions of the grieving? The historical record written by outsiders assumes the latter. The sin-eater is portrayed as a charlatan, preying on the vulnerable. But the truth is almost certainly more complex. It's likely that beliefs varied from one individual to the next. Some may have been cynical, but others, steeped in the same folkloric traditions as their clients, may have believed in their role as deeply unterrifyingly as anyone. This crisis sends you into a spiral. If the magic isn't real, then your entire life has been a waste. You haven't saved anyone. You have simply participated in a delusion. You have traded your name, your identity, your place in the world, not for the salvation of souls, but for a handful of cursed coins and a few stale crusts of bread. The weight you carry inside you is not the weight of their sins, but the weight of your own colossal foolishness. You look back on all the rituals, all the faces. You try to find proof, some undeniable sign that what you did was real, but there is none. The peace you saw on the faces of the mourners. That could just be the catharsis of completing a ritual, any ritual. The strange feelings you experienced. The human mind is a powerful and mysterious thing. It can surely conjure ghosts where there are none. This doubt is a more corrosive acid than any sin you have ever swallowed. It eats away at the very foundations of your world. If you are not a savior, then you are a fraud. And if you are a fraud, then your suffering has no meaning. You are just a lonely, broken man in a ruined hut, haunted not by the dead, but by the choices of a life you can no longer even remember. For days, you are paralyzed by this uncertainty. You don't go to the crossroads. You don't wait for the call. What is the point? To perform a lie. To cheat another grieving family with a piece of theatrical magic. But then, as your meager food supplies run low and the familiar pangs of real, physical hunger return, a different thought arises. What if it doesn't matter if it's real? The family of the pious man, they found comfort in the ritual. They believed it worked. Their fear was assuaged. Their grief was given a focal point, a moment of closure. You saw the relief in their eyes. You gave them that. Does it matter if the mechanism was magical or psychological? You provided a service. You eased their suffering. Perhaps your purpose is not to be a savior of souls, but a tender of grief. A strange, dark, but necessary physician for the sorrows of the living. Maybe the ritual isn't for the dead at all. This new idea doesn't restore your old faith, but it gives you a different kind of purpose. A more humble, more human one. You are not a dark priest. You are a quiet actor, playing a vital role in the final act of a person's life. And maybe, just maybe, that is enough. With this fragile, new understanding, you pick up your staff and your empty bowl, and you head back to the crossroads. The play must go on. Your new, more pragmatic understanding of your role serves you well for a time. You perform your duties with a kind of detached professionalism. You are an actor playing a part for a grieving audience, and you play it with the solemnity it deserves. But as more years slip by unnoticed and uncounted, you begin to observe a subtle but profound change in the world around you. The calls come less frequently. At first, you attribute it to a mild winter, a healthy season. But the pattern continues. Weeks and then months go by without the urgent summons of a messenger. You spend more and more time in your silent vigil at the crossroads, a grim statue that no one seems to need anymore. The world is changing, and the whispers of this change reach you even in your isolation. You see it in the people who pass you on the road. They walk with a different posture, a little less fear in their shoulders. You see new faces, strangers from outside the old, familiar network of villages, and they look at you not with superstitious dread, but with simple, mild curiosity, as if you were just a peculiar beggar. You overhear conversations, snippets of news from the city, talk of new ideas, new ways of thinking. The old fears that have been the bedrock of your profession are beginning to erode, like a cliff face battered by a slow but relentless tide. This was a very real historical process. The period from the 17th to the early 20th century, the era of the sin minus eta, was one of immense social and intellectual change. The rise of industrialization, increased literacy, and the formalization of religious doctrine all contributed to the decline of old folk beliefs. Superstitions that had held sway for centuries began to be seen as quaint, embarrassing, or simply illogical. Sin minus eta, once a vital spiritual necessity for many, was slowly being relegated to the status of a bizarre, outdated relic. One day, you are summoned to a village you haven't visited in years. The deceased is an old woman, one of the last of a generation that held the old ways sacred. As you perform the ritual, you notice the difference. The son who leads the ceremony recites the words, but his voice lacks the deep, terrified conviction you are used to. He seems to be going through the motions, fulfilling a promise to his mother rather than acting out of his own belief. The younger people in the room, the grandchildren, watch with a kind of awkward fascination. They are not participants. They are spectators at a historical reenactment. They are watching a piece of their grandparents' strange, dark world, a world they no longer truly inhabit. After the ritual, as you are being hustled out the door, coin in hand, you overhear one of the young women whisper to her husband, "Can you believe they used to do this? It's so morbid." The word stings more than any curse. Not evil, not blasphemous, but morbid, quaint, a little embarrassing. Your terrifying, sacred, and life minus defining profession has become a piece of theater for a new, more skeptical audience. The decline of the practice was not an overnight event. Historians who have studied it, like the folklorist Bertram S. Buckler, note that it clung on in the most isolated and remote as the deep valleys of Wales, the highlands of Scotland long after it had vanished from more populated regions. It became a fossil custom, practiced only by a few staunch traditionalists. You are becoming a fossil yourself, a living relic of a dying belief system. You return to your ruin with a new and unfamiliar feeling obsolescence. For your entire adult life, you have been defined by this terrible but necessary role. You were the outcast, the monster, the savior. But what are you when no one needs saving anymore? What is a sin minus eta when no one believes in the tangible, edible nature of sin? You are just a lonely old man in a ruined hut in the woods. The irony is crushing. You have spent your life in the service of a belief that is now fading from the world. You have carried the sins of a generation that is now almost gone. You are a walking repository of a forgotten spiritual currency. The weight in your soul, the library of faces, the chorus of borrowed emotions, it is all becoming meaningless, a vast collection of artifacts that no one else can see or understand. You look at your empty wooden bowl. For years it has been the symbol of your purpose. Now, it just looks like a piece of old carved wood. The magic is draining out of your world, leaving behind only the cold, hard, and unforgiving reality. The old ways are fading, and they are taking you, and the ghosts you carry with them. The fading of the old ways is mirrored by the fading of your own body. The years of hardship, of poor food and damp, cold nights have taken their toll. Your life, once a brutal but steady rhythm of survival, is now a daily negotiation with pain. A deep, persistent ache settles into your joints, a fire that never quite goes out. It is worse in the mornings, making the simple act of uncurling from your bed a straw a slow and agonizing process. You tell yourself it's just the damp, but you know it's more than that. It's the accumulation of a lifetime of sleeping on hard ground, of endless walking on frozen roads. Your breath becomes a fickle thing. The short walk to the stream to fetch water now leaves you winded, your heart hammering a frantic, unsteady rhythm against your ribs. A cough takes root deep in your chest, a dry, rattling sound that echoes the winter wind outside your ruin. Your hands, once strong enough to break fallen branches for firewood, have become gnarled and weak. The fingers are stiff, twisted into a permanent claw-like shape. Holding your staff is a comfort, but carving a piece of wood or even tying a simple knot has become a frustrating, often impossible task. This physical decline is the unwritten final chapter for so many people who lived on the margins of history. We have records of their births, perhaps, and sometimes their deaths, but the long, slow process of aging and decay is a silent one. For a sin-eater, who had no family to care for them, no access to even the most rudimentary medicine, and a body worn down by a uniquely stressful and impoverished life, the final years would have been a slow, lonely surrender to the inevitable. Your senses, which had been your primary tools for survival, begin to betray you. Your hearing becomes muffled, the sharp sounds of the forest, the snap of a twig, the call of birds softening into an indistinct blur. You are startled more easily now, a deer or a fox appearing suddenly in your field of vision where once you would have heard it coming from 100 paces away. Your eyesight is the cruelest loss. The world is losing its sharp edges, the leaves on the trees melting into a soft green haze. Reading the signs of the weather in the clouds, or spotting a distant traveler on the road, becomes a matter of guesswork. At night, the fire in your hearth is a comforting, blurry glow. But the shadows it casts are deeper, more menacing, because you can no longer be sure what lurks within them. One of the few things we know about the historical diet of the rural poor is that it was incredibly monotonous and often nutritionally deficient. A diet of four-aged goods, occasional scraps, and the rare, grim meal of your profession would have inevitably led to a host of health problems. The aches in your joints, the weakness in your limbs, these are the historically accurate symptoms of a life lived on the edge of starvation. The ghosts inside you seem to react to your body's betrayal. The aches and pains of the dead you carry now resonate with your own. You can no longer tell the difference between your own arthritis and the phantom rheumatism of old man Hemlock. The breathlessness you feel is your own, but it is amplified by the memory of the young mother's final, gasping breaths. Your physical suffering becomes a new, terrible symphony, played in concert with the echoes of their final illnesses. You spend more and more time huddled in your ruin, conserving your dwindling energy. The great, lonely walks between villages are a thing of the past. The world has shrunk to the size of your small clearing in the woods. Survival is no longer about finding the next meal or the next summons. It's about making it through the next hour. You look at your reflection in the water bucket. The face is ancient, skeletal, a thin mask of skin stretched over a skull. You see death in your own eyes. You who have spent a lifetime standing in the presence of death, mediating it, consuming its spiritual residue, are now finally facing your own. And a profound and terrifying question, one that has lurked in the back of your mind for years, now steps forward and demands an answer. Your body is failing, but who will be there for you? It comes on a day when the sky is the color of slate and a cold, persistent train is turning your clearing into a sea of mud. You are huddled by a smoky, reluctant fire, feeling the damp chill not just in the air, but deep inside your bones. You haven't had a summons in over a year. You had begun to believe that part of your life was over, that you would simply fade away here in your ruin, a forgotten relic. Then you hear a voice, a young man's voice calling out hesitantly from the edge of the woods. "Hello? Is anyone there?" The crossroads man. The effort to rise to your feet is monumental. Every joint screams in protest. You use your staff to haul yourself upright, your breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. You stumble to the entrance of your ruin and peer out into the grey, weeping world. A young man stands there, soaked to the skin, his face a picture of misery and desperation. He is a stranger, not from any of the nearby villages. He must have been sent from a great distance, a last resort. They told me I might find you here, he says, his teeth chattering. My grandmother. She's the last one who remembers the old ways. She won't rest. She won't let go. Until it's done properly, she made me promise. You just stare at him, a ghost in the doorway of a tomb. You feel a profound, bone-minus deep weariness that has nothing to do with the souls you carry. You are too old to this, too tired. The thought of the long walk, the ritual, the inevitable casting out, it's an impossible burden. But you see the desperate plea in the young man's eyes. You see his grief and his sense of sacred duty to his dying grandmother. And you know you cannot refuse. This is the work. This is the only thing you are. To refuse the call would be to deny the very meaning of your long, wretched life. With a slow, grim nod, you signal your assent. The journey is a slow, agonizing ordeal. The young man has to practically carry you at times, his strong arms supporting your frail, trembling body. Every step is a spike of pain. The world is a blur of rain and mud. You are not walking, you are being carried toward your duty. They take you to a tiny, isolated cottage high in the hills, a place that time has forgotten. The scene inside is the final, faded echo of every ritual you have ever performed. The dying woman on the bed is impossibly ancient, her face a translucent web of wrinkles, her breath a faint, papery whisper. She is the last believer, and you are the last priest of her dying faith. The ritual itself feels heavier, more freighted with meaning than any that have come before. The bread, held in your trembling hand, feels like a stone. The ale, in its simple cup, seems as dark and deep as a well. The handful of grieving family members watch in hushed, reverent silence. They do not believe, not really, but they are honoring the belief of the woman who is leaving them. As you eat, you feel it. One final transfer. It is not a dramatic torrent of sin. It is a slow, gentle cascade of memories. A life of 90 years filled with small joys, quiet sorrows, and the simple, enduring faith that has led to this final moment. You feel her for the children she raised in this cottage, her grief for a husband lost half a century ago. You feel her fear of the unknown, and underneath it all, a deep, unwavering conviction that you are her key to a peaceful passage. This final ritual is a historical grace note. While the custom of sin-minus eating largely died out by the late 19th century, there are anecdotal accounts and local legends of it being performed one last time, often for an elderly person who was the last in their community to hold to the old ways. The most famous, though often disputed, account is of the last sin-minus eater of Shropshire, Richard Munslow, who died in 1906. While historians debate whether Munslow was a professional sin-minus eater in the traditional sense, his story captures this sense of an ancient custom's final, fading gas. When you have finished, you set down the empty bowl. The old woman on the bed lets out a soft, final sigh, a sound of release. A profound stillness settles over the room. It is done. Your work is complete. The young man helps you to the door. He presses not one, but a handful of coins into your hand. Thank you, he whispers, and his voice is thick with a genuine, unfeigned gratitude that you have not heard in decades. Thank you for honoring her. He doesn't cast you out. He doesn't curse you. He simply closes the door gently, leaving you on the threshold. You turn and begin the impossible journey back. But you know you will not make it. Your body has given all it has to give. This last, final act has drained the last of your reserves. The weight of this final soul, added to all the others, is the single grain of sand that finally causes the mountain to collapse. This was your one final somber call, and you have answered it. You don't get far from the cottage in the hills. The strength that carried you through the final ritual evaporates, leaving you a hollow, shivering husk. The rain has stopped, but a thick, cold mist has risen, swallowing the landscape and muffling all sound. You find a small alcove in a rock outcropping, a shallow cave barely deep enough to shelter you from the wind, and you collapse onto the damp earth. This is it, the end of the road. Your body has made its final protest, and there is no more energy to argue with it. A strange lucidity descends upon you, a clarity that often precedes the final darkness. The pains in your joints and chest recede, replaced by a gentle, spreading coldness that begins in your feet and inches its way upward. You lie there, propped against the cold stone, and you look out at the swirling grey mist. Your life, or what is left of it, unspools in your mind. But it is not your life you see. It is the lives of the others. You see Old Man Hemlock's fields, golden under a summer sun. You see the blacksmith's wife, her face soft with love as she cradles a sleeping child. You see the quick, violent anger of the town drunkard, and the quiet, gnawing regret of the pious churchwarden. They are all here with you now, the 100 souls, the silent company you have kept for a lifetime. They are not a burden anymore. They are just you. The chaotic library of your mind has finally found its order. You are the sum of all the lives you have saved. And in this final, clear-minded moment, the ultimate, tragic irony of your existence presents itself. It is a question that has haunted the edges of your thoughts for years, a question you could never truly bear to face. But there is no escaping it now. Who will eat your sins? You have spent a lifetime taking on the spiritual debts of others, ensuring their clean passage. You are the great purifier, the scapegoat, the vessel of redemption. But now, as your own soul prepares for its journey, there is no one. There is no one to perform the ritual for you. There is no one to place the bread on your chest. There is no one to drink the ale of your transgressions. What were your sins anyway? You struggle to remember. Your own life is a blank page. But you must have had them. The sin of pride, perhaps in your own endurance. The sin of despair, in the long, lonely nights. The sin of envy, for the warm, simple lives of the villagers. And what of the greatest sin of all, the one that defined your entire existence, the sin of performing a blasphemous, forbidden rite, over and over again? This question is the logical and heartbreaking conclusion to the sin-eater's story. It is a paradox that the folklore itself rarely, if ever, addresses. The system had no mechanism for the salvation of its own savior. The sin-eater was a spiritual dead end. Their function was to absorb and contain, not to be cleansed themselves. Some academic theories suggest that this was an implicit part of the bargain. The sin-eater accepted their own damnation in exchange for survival on Earth. It was the ultimate sacrifice, a kind of dark martyrdom. You look down at your own thin, still chest. You imagine a loaf of bread resting there. A heavy loaf, dense with the accumulated sins of 100 other souls, plus your own. A meal that no one on earth would be strong enough or damned enough to consume. A faint, dry chuckle escapes your lips, a sound like rustling leaves. It's the final, perfect cruelty of it all. The shepherd who has no shepherd, the healer who cannot heal himself. You could despair, you could rage against the injustice of it, but you are too tired for that. The cold has reached your heart now. The swirling mist seems to be entering your very being, blurring the final lines between the world and yourself. You find to your surprise that you are not afraid. Perhaps you think this is the final secret of your trade. Perhaps you do not need a sin-eater because you are already full. You are not an empty soul, stained by a few meager, personal sins. You are a universe of souls. You contain multitudes. And when you arrive at whatever comes next, you will not arrive alone. You will bring with you the farmer, the mother, the drunkard, the pious man, and the old woman from the hill. You will bring your entire flock with you. What gatekeeper, you wonder, could possibly turn away such a crowd? This is your final question. And in the profound, deepening silence, you find you already have the only answer that matters. The mist grows thicker, softer, until it is no longer outside you, but a part of you. The feeling of the cold, hard stone at your back begins to dissolve. The distinction between your body and the world, a boundary you have felt so sharply your entire life, is finally, gently, erasing itself. You are not dying, you are merging. The chorus of voices in your head, the chaotic library of souls you have carried for so long, begins to quiet. Not into silence, but into harmony. The sharp, jagged edges of their individual griefs and angers and regrets are softening, blending together, Grasping Thomas' greed is soothed by anxious Alice's love. Angry Jack's rage is calmed by the quiet piety of the churchwarden. It is a slow, gentle alchemy, a process of reconciliation that has taken a lifetime to complete, happening now in the final moments within the vessel of your soul. You feel a profound sense of release, not just for yourself but for them. You were not their jailer. You were their sanctuary. You gave them a place to rest, to jostle against one another, until their sins were no more than memories, and their memories were no more than stories, and the stories have now faded into a single, peaceful heart. You have become a silence, but it is not an empty silence. It is a silence full of souls. Your own sins, the ones you fretted over moments ago, seem so small and distant now. The sin of despair, it is answered by the 100 moments of hope you have carried for others. The sin of pride in your endurance, it is humbled by the memory of 100 deathbeds. You have no single personal account to settle. Your account is vast, communal, a ledger of an entire community's hidden life. And in its final tally, you find that it balances perfectly. The last sensation you are aware of is not of cold, or pain, or fear. It is a feeling of immense, immeasurable peace. A stillness that is deeper than any sleep you have ever known. You have spent your life on the outside, a perpetual outcast. But here, at the very end, you have become the ultimate insider, the keeper of everyone's final secrets, the heart of the community's hidden life. You took their sins, yes. But in doing so, you also took their humanity, their loves, their fears, their small, secret joys. And it is this, not the sin, that remains. The light fades completely, not into blackness, but into a soft, gentle grey, the colour of the mist, the colour of a dawn that is not of this world. Your work is done. The final page has been turned. The last meal has been eaten. There is no one to mourn you. There is no one to mark your passing. A body will be found in a shallow cave, the body of an old, nameless wanderer. They will bury you in an unmarked grave at the edge of the churchyard, outside the consecrated ground. They will do this to protect themselves, one last act of ritual shunning. But they are wrong. You are not the thing to be feared. You are the peace they have been searching for all along. You are the silence that follows the final prayer. You are the clean slate. You are the quiet, dreamless sleep that comes after a long and difficult life. You are, at last, free. And so the story of the sin-eater comes to its gentle, quiet end. The path that was so hard and so lonely has finally dissolved into the landscape, becoming one with the mist and the ancient stones of the hills. The heavy burden has been laid down, not in anger or despair, but in a final, profound stillness. If you are still listening, you might feel a sense of that stillness beginning to settle over you. A quiet that is not empty, but full of a deep and abiding peace. The weight of the day, all of its small struggles and sharp edges, can begin to soften now, just as the sins did in our story. They can blend into the background, losing their power, becoming just faint echoes in the vast, quiet space of your own approaching rest. There is nothing more to understand, nothing left to carry. The journey is over. All that remains is this peaceful silence, this comfortable darkness. A space for you to drift, to float, to let go completely. Allow this quiet to be your companion now, as you find your own passage into the gentle landscape of your dreams. And so our story for tonight comes to a gentle close. If you're still listening, and that's perfectly all right, you'll find many other quiet paths on this channel to walk upon. For now, sleep well. Good night.